Not silent, never silent, but calm in that deep, old way that only the ocean could be. Each wave rose and fell like the slow breathing of a sleeping world. The stars above Bikini Bottom twinkled through the water, soft trails of light bending and dancing as they met the gentle ripples. Everything shimmered faintly gold, not the gold of treasure, but the gold of warmth, of memory. The hour was late. The coral streets of the town were empty. Not a bubble stirred from the chimneys, not a fin moved in the current. The ocean floor rested, wrapped in a sleepy hush. But there, on the edge of the sea, where the soft sand met the long, dark horizon, sat SpongeBob SquarePants. He wasn't thinking of work or jellyfishing or tomorrow's shift at the Krusty Krab. He just sat quietly, legs tucked under him, eyes reflecting the golden glow that flickered faintly in the waves. The world was asleep, but the sea was awake, and it was whispering something. He tilted his head. The sound came from deep beneath the water's hum, not quite a voice, not quite a song, more like a memory that the ocean itself was trying to remember. He hugged his old spatula close, the one he'd used since his very first day at the grill. Its edges were worn smooth, its shine faded. But tonight, in the moonlight, it caught a glimmer of gold. Long before Krabby Patties, a voice drifted, soft as the tide, there was only the sea. SpongeBob blinked. The words didn't echo from any direction. They came from everywhere. The bubbles rising, the shifting sand, the rolling current, all of it, carried the voice as one. The sea glowed a little brighter. Tiny golden motes floated up from the sand, swirling around SpongeBob like slow, sleepy fireflies. They moved with purpose, circling him, then drifting out toward the open water as if guiding him to listen deeper. He leaned forward, the hem of his pajamas fluttering in the water. "Hello?" he whispered. His voice didn't echo. The sea absorbed it gently, like a mother holding a child's question. The water pulsed softly, once, twice, and then the voice came again. "In the beginning there was no Krusty Krab, no spatulas, no jellyfish fields, only waves and warmth, and in that warmth, a spark, a small, golden thought was born. The glow deepened, spreading out in gentle rings that illuminated the dark seabed. SpongeBob's eyes widened. It was like the sea had turned into a lantern, a memory flickering awake after ages of sleep. He stood, the sand puffing beneath his feet. The current tugged at him, playful but insistent, as if saying, "Follow me." And so he did. Slowly, carefully, he walked toward the light. The sound grew clearer, like an old story retold by the waves themselves. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The ocean had patience, infinite patience. Every syllable drifted like a bubble, rising toward understanding. As SpongeBob moved farther from shore, the scenery changed. The coral dimmed into soft blues and violets. The sand turned smooth and silver. Above him, jellyfish glowed like drifting lanterns, pulsing in rhythm with the voice. "The sea remembers," it said gently. "It remembers the warmth that gave life to its first creation. A tool not of power but of purpose, born not to rule the waves but to serve them. A promise made in gold." SpongeBob paused. The spatula in his hand trembled faintly, or maybe it was his imagination. But when he looked down, he could see faint trails of gold dancing along its handle, curling like veins of light. He gasped softly, his pupils shimmering with awe. "You mean," he began almost too quietly to hear, "this was part of that?" The sea hummed again, a low, approving sound, full of kindness. All things that serve with love are part of the same current, the voice said. Even you, sponge of the square pants. He smiled despite himself, cheeks flushing a little, at the sound of his full name spoken with such ancient calm. The current swirled playfully around him, nudging him toward a shallow rise of coral. He climbed it slowly, and from its top he could see far out into the open water. There, in the distance, a faint golden glow pulsed at the heart of the sea. It was small but steady, like a lantern in an endless dark. SpongeBob stared, mesmerized. The current whispered again, this time softer, almost shy. Every age forgets, and every age remembers anew. Tonight you listen, so listen well. SpongeBob sat cross-legged atop the coral mound, resting his spatula on his lap. His eyes fluttered closed. The voice wasn't something he needed to chase. It would come to him like the tide. The hum deepened, surrounding him in a warm cradle of sound. It wasn't just the sea speaking anymore. It was everything. The shifting shells, the heartbeat of the tide, the soft clinking of drifting pebbles, they all joined the rhythm, a slow lullaby of memory. And then faintly, from beneath it all, a melody began. Not sung, not played, simply existing. The kind of song the ocean hums when it dreams. Golden motes drifted upward, spiraling into the water above him. They formed vague shapes, outlines of old creatures, long gone from the sea. Whale-like forms, vast and gentle, swam in silence. Coral towers rose and fell like breathing giants. The whole ocean seemed alive with ghosts of its own history. SpongeBob's expression softened. He didn't feel small, he felt part of it, as though the entire ocean's story was being told just for him. He whispered, barely audible, "Tell me more." The golden motes gathered into a slow spiral, swirling into a glowing path leading out toward the deep. "Then follow, little cook," the sea breathed. "The story of warmth begins where the waves meet the fire." A pulse of light rippled through the water, not harsh, not bright, but living. The current stirred around him, rustling his nightcap and sending his spatula a glimmering softly dot. The ocean deepened its breath. The hum that had been soft and gentle now began to pulse with quiet energy, not louder but older. The glow at the horizon shimmered once, twice, like a heartbeat awakening beneath the waves. SpongeBob held his spatula close, his round eyes wide with wonder. The water around him vibrated with a warmth that felt alive, as if he was standing inside a dream that remembered itself. Tiny specks of gold drifted past his fingers, landing on his hands like fireflies that didn't burn. "Long ago," the voice murmured, "the sea was colder, empty of laughter, still without purpose. The creatures drifted, fed and slept. They did not dream. They did not create." The sound echoed like ripples spreading through eternity. SpongeBob felt the weight of the words sink into him. He could almost see it, the early ocean, vast and blue-gray, with silent mountains of coral and drifting clouds of sand. And then, faintly, something stirred. The light from the golden horizon grew stronger, cutting through the dark waters like dawn through mist. It shimmered and coiled, forming shapes, outlines of ancient sea creatures that swam in slow motion, as if half awake. Their bodies glowed faintly gold, each movement sending sparks into the current. "But even in the stillness," said the sea, "something yearned, not for power, but for warmth." The words filled the water with a tremor of emotion, not sorrow, not joy, but something older than both. SpongeBob's breath caught. "Warmth," he whispered, "like the kind you get when you cook something for a friend." The sea hummed approvingly. The golden particles around him brightened slightly. Yes, little cook. The warmth that fills the space between hunger and love. The warmth that turns emptiness into comforts. That is where creation begins. The current shifted, pulling SpongeBob gently forward. Ahead of him, the glow from the deep grew brighter, more defined now, flickering like a flame that somehow lived beneath the ocean. He swam slowly toward it, every motion smooth and careful, as though he might wake something ancient if he moved too fast. The ocean floor dipped lower, curving into a vast hollow. And there it was, a great fissure in the seabed glowing with golden fire. Not hot, not burning, just alive. The flames danced in silence, coiling like ribbons of sunlight caught in slow motion. Around it, massive coral pillars leaned inward, their tips blackened slightly as though they had once tried to contain the warmth and failed. SpongeBob's eyes widened, pupils reflecting the firelight. What is that? The sea's voice softened, almost like a lullaby. That, little one, is the heart of the sea, the first spark that ever burned beneath the waves. Born from the longing of still waters, it gave warmth to the cold and light to the deep. SpongeBob's chest rose and fell in slow awe. He could feel the heat not on his skin, but in his heart. It wasn't just warmth, it was emotion. It was the feeling of care, like baking cookies at midnight, or flipping a patty with pride. He looked down at the spatula in his hand. Its metal shimmered faintly in response, catching the golden glow. From this warmth, the sea continued, came purpose. And from purpose came creation. The golden fire twisted upward, and in it, SpongeBob saw shapes, faint images of hands forming tools, fins carving coral, small beings gathering around the glow for comfort. The first chefs of the sea, the first creators, the first givers of warmth. They were not mighty, the voice whispered. They were not kings or warriors. They were makers, shaping meals from sea foam and sand, feeding others, not themselves. The golden shapes moved gracefully, forming a circle around the flame. They held simple tool shells, coral spoons, flat stones. Their movements were slow, almost ritualistic. The sea glowed brighter with each act of giving. And so the heart gave them a gift, a tool forged from its light, something that could hold the warmth without dimming it. SpongeBob's eyes grew even wider. The golden spatula, he breathed. The sea did not answer immediately. Instead, the light at the fish's center flared not in brightness, but in emotion. A deep hum filled the water, vibrating through SpongeBob's chest. Then, from the molten glow, something rose. A shape long, slender, gleaming, forged not from metal, but from living gold. Its surface shimmered like the surface of the sea at sunrise. It rotated slowly, bubbles rising around it like tiny stars. The first spatula. But not a weapon. Not a symbol of fame. It floated weightlessly, almost shyly, like it didn't know what it was yet. The heart whispered into it, the sea said softly, and gave it one command: serve with warmth. The golden spatula glowed brighter, and then drifted gently toward the circle of ancient cooks. One by one they touched it, and with each touch the glow spread, flowing into their tools, their hands, their hearts. The whole sea changed color from dull blue to living gold. From that day forward, said the sea, every act of care beneath the waves carried a spark of that warmth. Every meal cooked with love, every kindness shared, was another flame added to the heart. SpongeBob could barely breathe. His chest swelled with emotion, a strange mixture of pride, wonder, and peace. He looked again at his spatula, old, scratched, simple, but now it shimmered faintly like it was answering an ancient call. He whispered to himself, "So this is where it all began." The current swirled around him, gentle but sure, brushing his sleeves, rustling his nightcap. "All beginnings live in the quiet places," the voice said, "and every listener becomes part of the telling." The golden spatula above the fissure began to drift downward, sinking slowly back into the fire. The glow dimmed, turning from brilliant gold to a warm amber. The images of the ancient cooks faded, their light dissolving into bubbles that floated upward like dreams released. SpongeBob stood still, letting it all wash over him. The story wasn't finished yet, he could feel it. But he also knew legends took their time. The sea was never in a hurry. The hum softened into silence. The glow faded until only the faint shimmer of plankton remained. And then, just before the quiet settled completely, a single golden bubble rose from the fissure and drifted toward him. He reached out instinctively. It landed on the tip of his spatula and stayed there, glowing softly. SpongeBob smiled, not his wide, silly smile, but a small, grateful one. "Thank you," he said, as if the ocean could hear. It could. The water pulsed once tenderly. The ocean had gone quiet again, but not in emptiness. It was the kind of quiet that holds its breath after telling a story, the hush of a lullaby's last note. SpongeBob floated still, surrounded by darkness that shimmered faintly, as though the sea itself were made of sleeping stars. The golden bubble that had landed on his spatula glowed softly, its light trembling like a heartbeat. He turned the spatula slowly in his hands. The glow inside the bubble pulsed once, and then, as if sensing his touch, it seeped gently into the metal. The plain silver spatula shimmered faintly, no longer dull, not golden yet, but kissed by memory. "Keep the warmth alive." The words echoed again in his mind, soft as the current that brushed past his sleeve. He looked around him. The fissure below was now only a faint shimmer, its fire tucked back into the belly of the earth. But the glow wasn't gone. It lingered in the coral, in the sand, in the tiny plankton floating lazily past. It was as if the entire sea had swallowed a candle and was quietly letting it burn. SpongeBob smiled softly. The warmth in his chest spread to his fingertips. He whispered, "Okay, I will." Then, with a small kick of his legs, he began to swim upward. The water thickened as he rose, its pressure loosening with each meter. He could see faint outlines now, seaweed bowing with the current, shells glowing faintly like sleeping eyes, the shadows of distant jellyfish drifting by, their bodies slow and graceful. The golden traces of the deep followed him, spiraling upward in a ribbon of soft light. It looked like a trail of bubbles catching sunlight long before the sun had risen. When he finally broke through the shallow reef near Bikini Bottom, the water was tinted with twilight, that perfect moment between night and dawn where the ocean looks like it's thinking. He floated there for a while, silent. The waves around him whispered gently against the rocks, their crests tipped with gold. SpongeBob tilted his head up. The sky above the surface shimmered faintly pink, though the sun hadn't yet risen. It felt peaceful. But more than that, it felt alive. Every sound, every movement carried meaning. The hush of the tide was a sigh, the shimmer of bubbles a laugh, the quiet ticking of his heart a drumbeat to something older than time. He whispered to himself, maybe the ocean doesn't just hold stories. Maybe it shares them. The current answered him with a soft push, carrying him gently back toward his pineapple house. The motion was so smooth, so careful, that it almost felt like the sea itself didn't want to wake the sleeping world. As SpongeBob approached the reef edge, something flickered beneath him, a reflection that didn't belong. He looked down. There, in the water's surface, he saw himself holding the spatula. But it wasn't the ordinary reflection he expected. The light around it shimmered faintly gold. The spatula in the reflection looked older, not worn, but timeless. Its edges glowed faintly like the outline of something remembered by the sea itself. SpongeBob blinked, tilting his head. The reflection rippled and changed, showing flashes of seams, hands, claws, and fins flipping glowing patties across shimmering seas, laughter rising in waves, warmth spreading like ripples through the world. He gasped softly. The image faded. The reflection stilled. But the feeling stayed. He could almost hear the laughter that wasn't his, the kindness that wasn't from his time cooks and caretakers, from ages long gone, passing warmth down like a secret recipe whispered through generations of waves. He lifted the spatula close to his chest, holding it like a memory. "Thank you," he whispered again. But this time, it wasn't just to the ocean. It was to everyone who'd ever held a spatula with care. The water shimmered faintly, as if nodding. The first golden thread of dawn finally touched the edge of the water. It stretched across the waves, painting everything in a thin layer of liquid light. Bikini Bottom began to appear outlines of coral homes, sleeping jellyfish drifting past, the faint glimmer of the Krusty Krab sign in the distance, half buried in morning mist. The hum of the ocean grew softer now, replaced by the distant murmur of waking life bubbles, small currents, and the sound of tiny fish beginning their morning dance. SpongeBob smiled sleepily. He felt like he hadn't just learned something, he'd remembered something that had always been there. His spatula, now faintly warm, pulsed gently in his hand, not glowing brightly, just enough to feel alive, like a quiet heartbeat of the sea itself. "Warmth lives in small hands," the voice whispered faintly, fading with the tide. "Even the smallest flame can feed a world." SpongeBob blinked slowly, feeling his eyes grow heavy. He wasn't tired, not in the usual way. He was fulfilled with a calm so deep, it felt like he could rest inside it forever. He drifted closer to shore, letting the waves carry him until his feet touched the sand. The waterline shimmered gold around his ankles, fading quickly into silver as the sun began to peak higher. His pineapple house loomed ahead, round, warm, familiar. He giggled softly. "I wonder if the ocean gets hungry after telling stories." Then he turned, glancing back once more. The sea stretched endlessly, its surface rippling like a soft blanket. And for a moment, just a flicker, he thought he saw it. The faintest glint of gold beneath the surface, a single spark winking up at him. It wasn't a reflection. It was the sea saying goodbye. SpongeBob raised his spatula in a small salute, the same way a cook salutes a friend before the first flip of the day. "See you at sunrise," he whispered. The breeze shifted. A tiny bubble drifted past his nose, glowing faintly before popping soundlessly. And somewhere far below, the heart of the sea pulsed, once gentle, eternal, patient. SpongeBob walked slowly up the coral path toward home. The sand beneath his feet felt softer than usual, as if it, too, had listened to the story. When he opened the door, the faint aroma of last night's Krabby Patties lingered in the air, mingled with the smell of salt and dawn. Gary was still asleep, curled on his shell, breathing tiny bubbles. SpongeBob smiled and whispered, "Good morning, buddy," though he knew Gary couldn't hear him. He set his spatula gently on the counter. It caught the morning light, and for a second it shone like gold. He stood there, watching the light dance across it, the corners of his mouth curving into a peaceful smile. Morning unfolded slowly over Bikini Bottom, not loud, not rushed, but like the world was stretching after a long, kind dream. Sunlight filtered through the waves in threads of gold, weaving across rooftops and coral fences. The streets shimmered softly as schools of fish drifted lazily by, their scales catching the new light. The hum of the ocean deepened, not the voice of the legend anymore, but its echo living quietly in the rhythm of the waking world. Inside his pineapple home, SpongeBob stirred. His eyes blinked open to the warm flicker of sunlight filtering through coral-patterned curtains. The smell of salt, of morning, and of something faintly sweet lingered in the room, the sea's gift. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, and noticed the spatula on his nightstand. It gleamed softly, the same way moonlight reflects off calm water. Not bright, not glowing, just alive. SpongeBob picked it up, smiling. "Good morning, old friend," he said quietly. He didn't know if the spatula had truly changed, or if he was simply seeing it differently now, but it didn't matter. The warmth he'd carried from the deep still pulsed faintly in the handle, and when he held it, he felt as though the ocean itself was still with him, calm, ancient, kind. Gary yawned from his shell, blinking up at him with sleepy eyes. "Meow?" SpongeBob chuckled softly. "Yep. Big day today." He stood, stretching, and walked to the kitchen. Everything looked the same as always. Tidy counters, a few leftover crumbs, the smell of kelp toast. But the sunlight coming through the window painted everything with a faint golden hue, like a gentle blessing. He twirled the spatula once in his hand. It caught the light perfectly. And then, softly, he whispered, "Let's make something warm." The scene shifts wide, establishing shot of the Krusty Krab under the morning glow. The sign flickers lazily to life, and the water ripples gold around it. Inside, everything is still quiet. The tables gleam faintly in the early light. A jellyfish floats by the window. SpongeBob steps in, apron on, humming softly to himself the tune, gentle, almost like a lullaby. He flips the lights on one by one, each switch sounding like the tick of a clock starting its day. He looks around, breathes in deeply, and says to no one in particular, "Feels like a good morning for stories." Then he walks to the grill. The metal surface gleams faintly. As SpongeBob places his spatula down beside it, a faint reflection ripples across for just a second. It looks like waves dancing across the grill. He pauses, smiling softly. "Still watching, huh?" he whispers to the ocean beyond the walls. He starts cooking slowly, deliberately not rushed like on busy days. Each flip, each turn of the patty carries a rhythm, steady, patient, calm. The patties sizzle quietly, their sound mingling with the soft hum of the sea outside. In that moment, the Krusty Krab feels different. It isn't just a restaurant. It's a continuation of something ancient, something living. SpongeBob's movements flow like a ritual passed down through time. The flip of the spatula mirrors the tide turning. The hiss of the grill echoes waves over sand. Every motion tells a story, the same story the ocean whispered to him the night before. As he works, faint images seem to shimmer around him. Not ghosts, not hallucinations, but memories the sea left behind. For a moment, he sees a cook, from long ago a shadowed figure, its outline made of light, turning something golden over fire beneath the waves. Another image, hands passing a gleaming spatula to another, the metal shining softly, warmth moving from one heart to the next. Then it fades. Only SpongeBob remains, smiling softly at the grill. He presses down a patty gently, listening to it sizzle. "There you go," he whispers. You've got to be patient with the warmth. The first Krabby Patty of the day finishes cooking. He places it carefully on a bun and sets it on the counter. Outside, the water glows brighter. Mr. Krab steps out from his office, rubbing his eyes. "Eh? You started early again, lad?" SpongeBob grins, his voice still hushed but glowing with happiness. "Couldn't sleep, sir. The sea was telling stories again." Mr. Krabs chuckles. "Aye, that she does. Always humming when there's gold in the morning." SpongeBob laughs, but his eyes remain soft. "It's not that kind of gold, Mr. Krabs. It's the warm kind." Mr. Krabs blinks, confused for a second, then shrugs. "Huh, whatever makes the grill sizzle, boyo." He walks off, leaving SpongeBob alone again in the quiet hum of the kitchen. For a while, SpongeBob simply stands there, watching the light move across the spatula's surface. He remembers the whisper. Warmth lives in small hands. He looks down at his yellow, spongy fingers, ordinary, humble, and smiles. Even the smallest flame can feed a world. He sets down another patty and watching it shimmer. And just then, as the first customer of the day pushes open the Krusty Krab doors, a faint glow ripples across the spatula one last time. It's soft, subtle, almost unnoticeable, like the ocean breathing through him. The glow fades, but its warmth stays. The camera drifts outward past the sizzling grill, past the dining room, through the open Krusty Krab doors into the golden water of morning. We see the ocean stretching endlessly again, the sunlight scattering across its surface like liquid glass. For a moment, the faint hum returns, the same ancient melody from the deep, but now brighter, lighter, playful, as if the ocean itself is smiling. Deep below, far beyond where the light usually reaches, the fissure glows once again, not with fire this time, but with warmth. Tiny golden bubbles rise from it, drifting upward through the layers of sea. Each bubble carries a faint reflection, moments of kindness, laughter, the sizzle of a grill, the smile of a sponge. It is not the hum of fish or machines, but something older. A pulse, a memory, the slow breathing sound of the ocean's heart. The deeper one drifts, the more the world changes. The bright colors fade into blues, then into silvers, then into near darkness. Tiny flecks of glowing plankton drift like stars scattered through a velvet void. The water thickens with quiet. Every sound stretches into forever. Then faintly there's a rhythm. Clink and clink and clink. Each strike rings like the slow beat of a heart made of coral and time. We move through a forest of black coral, its branches curved and spined like the ribs of some sleeping giant. A faint glow pulses between them, warm, alive, golden. And there, nestled deep within an ancient hollow, lies the forge beneath the waves. It is not built like any workshop known to the living. It is carved from volcanic stone, smooth as glass, veined with lines of fire that twist like seaweed through the rock. Pillars rise like old coral trunks, each one breathing faint light. Tiny bubbles rise constantly from vents along the floor, drifting upward like sparks through a midnight ocean. In the center sits a great anvil made of petrified shell, shimmering faintly with pearlescent sheen. Above it, suspended in the water by currents only it seems to control, floats the blacksmith of the deep. The blacksmith is not made of flesh, not exactly. Its body shifts between form and glow, jellyfish-like, its tendrils curling gently through the dark. Its eyes burn like twin embers, not angry, but ancient and wise. Its song hums softly, vibrating through the water, a deep, slow melody, equal parts lullaby and prayer. It does not speak in words. It speaks in resonance, a language of hums and ripples that makes coral tremble and bubbles rise. Before it floats a glowing pool of molten gold, not mined, not dug, but formed from the ocean's own warmth. Lava once spilled into the deep long ago, cooled by the waves, but captured by this being's patience. Over centuries, it gathered the gold from the sand, purified it through stillness, and now shapes it with care. Each movement of the blacksmith is slow, deliberate, sacred. Its hammer is no weapon, but a part of itself grown from its glowing tendrils and fused with stone. Every swing feels less like force and more like rhythm, like a heartbeat echoing through the sea. Clink. A spark of gold drifts outward, floating away like a jellyfish egg. Clink. The sound spreads in ripples, disturbing sleeping fish far above. Clink. The hum deepens. The water itself seems to breathe. From the molten pool, the blacksmith pulls a shape. Not sharp, not fierce. A handle, smooth and curved, built for a steady grip, not a warrior's strike. The gold glows brighter as it's drawn upward, flowing through the blacksmith's form as though it were alive, guided by the creature's pulse. Each touch is gentle, reverent, like shaping something beloved. Around the forge, old runes flicker across the coral walls. They are not words, but echoes, symbols of kindness, patience, nourishment. They hum faintly, lighting up in rhythm with each hammer's fall. The blacksmith hums along with them, a sound like the sea sighing. For a moment, the scene grows brighter. The entire chamber breathes with golden light, the molten glow painting the water in amber streaks. The heat is not harsh. It feels like comfort, like sunlight remembered by the ocean. The blacksmith stops, its tendrils slowing. It gazes at the half-formed shape resting on the anvil, what will soon become the Golden Spatula. And in that silence, it whispers its first words, not in speech, but in the gentle pulse of thought through the sea. Not for hunger, not for battle, for care. The ocean stirs in answer. Outside the forge, sand begins to swirl gently, forming spirals. Small creatures, worms, snails, even fish pause, feeling the vibration ripple through their scales. The water temperature rises faintly but kindly, like a soft blanket wrapping the deep. The blacksmith returns to work. Each strike is accompanied by a vision, not of war or glory, but of giving. In one pulse, the gold flashes, and the faint image of a motherfish feeding her fry drifts across the wall. In another, a hermit crab sharing a shell with another during a storm. Each memory leaves a mark on the spatula's forming surface, invisible, but lasting. Every kindness the ocean has ever known becomes part of the gold's memory. The hammer stills. The blacksmith breathes deeply. The molten pool cools. Now only one final touch remains. The being raises its tendrils and dips the spatula into the pool once more, but not to heat it. Instead, it lets the last of the gold's glow sink into the handle like breath. The light pulses faintly, steady like a heartbeat. The blacksmith hums once more, slower now, deeper. The sound carries far past trenches, through currents, up toward the mid-sea where light still dares to shimmer. It reaches old coral, and they hum in return. It reaches passing whales who add their voices to the chord. It reaches even the sands beneath the future Krusty Krab, which stir softly, remembering. And when the final note fades, the forge grows quiet again. The blacksmith holds the spatula aloft, turning it in the dim light. The glow is not constant. It pulses gently as though alive. It looks humble, a simple tool. No jewels, no carvings. Yet in its reflection, one could see the entire ocean moving. The blacksmith tilts its head. A faint echo of a smile seems to form in the shimmer of its glow. a flame that feeds, not burns. It sets the spatula down onto a coral pedestal in the center of the forge. The glow spills outward, running like veins through the coral floor. And slowly, the light begins to fade, not into darkness, but into peace. Above, the deep sea quiets. The last hammer strike lingers in the distance like thunder remembered. Fish drift past, their eyes catching the faintest reflection of something golden far below. One curious jellyfish floats closer, its tendrils brushing the current that rises from the forge. The warmth touches it, and it pulses softly, glowing a little brighter than before. It drifts upward again, carrying that warmth toward the surface. Little by little, that warmth spreads not through fire, but through life. Long after the last hum of the blacksmith fades, the spatula continues to pulse faintly. The light within it breathes softly, matching the rhythm of the sea. For a time, maybe years, maybe centuries, it rests in the dark. The ocean forgets, as the ocean always does. New reefs grow over the ancient anvil. Layers of sand drift down, covering the forge like a blanket. The heat cools into stillness. Silence deepens. Then one night a current stirs. A faint quake trembles through the trench. A cluster of glowing fish scatter, startled. The coral that has slept for ages hums faintly once more. And from beneath that coral blanket, a single glimmer pierces through gold, pure and gentle, like the first sunrise after a storm. The golden spatula awakens. It trembles softly, not from force, but from purpose remembered. The currents whisper around it, curious, reverent. The sand slips away, freeing its handle. With a sigh as light as a bubble, the spatula drifts upward. It does not rise quickly. It floats, spinning slowly in the darkness, trailing a faint golden shimmer that illuminates the old coral walls. The forge watches silently as its creation ascends like a lantern leaving a temple. And as it drifts higher, the ocean begins to change. The surrounding waters react. Old shells crack open, releasing tiny motes of light that had been trapped for centuries. Sea anemones wake, swaying gently to an unseen rhythm. Schools of fish follow in the spatula's path as though drawn to its calm warmth. Each creature it passes, from the smallest shrimp to the slow-moving turtle, pauses, bathed for a moment in soft gold. Their scales shimmer, their eyes reflect peace. It is as though the spatula's glow carries a feeling more than light, a reminder of gentleness. Above, the currents begin to dance. The spatula continues its journey, weightless and serene, twisting slowly through arches of coral and canyons of stone. It passes an old wreck, its timbers long since worn to bone-white driftwood. Inside, a lone starfish sleeps against the hull, its 5 arms curled inward. As the spatula floats past, the starfish uncurls and glows faintly gold. A crab scuttles from behind a rock, blinking in the glow. It lifts its claws in wonder, then lowers them again, humbled. The ocean holds its breath. The spatula drifts past an underwater vent, where warm bubbles rise like dreams escaping from the earth. It lets the bubbles carry it higher, slowly twirling in their wake. Each rotation reveals more of its beauty, though it is not adorned with jewels. It shines with sincerity. The gold glows differently with every turn, now soft as candlelight, now sharp as sunrise. And still, at its center, the heartbeat glow continues steady, gentle, alive. It is as though it remembers why it was made. For care, for kindness, for those who make warmth in cold places. The blacksmith's old words echo faintly, traveling with it through the deep. At the edge of the trench, where the deep meets the open sea, the spatula slows. Here the water's colder, shadows are longer, the world seems quieter. Then a sound faint, melodic filters through the dark. A whale's song, long, deep, mournful, yet gentle. The spatula shivers faintly in response. It drifts toward the sound, drawn like a leaf to a current. The whale is vast, silver blue and wise, its eyes closed as it hums. Around it, tiny fish hover in awe, listening. As the spatula approaches, the whale opens one eye, glowing softly in the reflected light. Oh, the old creature tilts its head, sensing what floats before it. A single low note escapes the whale's throat, deep enough to shake the coral below. And the ocean around them responds, currents swirl, sand lifts, shells vibrate. The spatula glows brighter, as if acknowledging the whale's greeting. The whale nods once, slowly in ancient recognition, and with a gentle flick of its tail, sends a current spiraling upward. The spatula catches the current and rises again, faster now, towards the middle ocean. As it ascends, its golden light passes through curtains of seaweed and shoals of jellyfish. The jellyfish pulse in rhythm with its glow, their translucent bodies turning golden for a heartbeat before fading back to blue. The spatula's trail becomes a river of soft luminescence, a golden current winding through the dark. It passes a field of sand dollars resting in perfect patterns. As the light touches them, they shimmer like tiny suns. Even the ocean's predators' sleek, sharp shadows slow as it passes. Their eyes soften, their movements calm. The spatula's light does not fight them. It simply is, and that peace tames even hunger for a moment. It is not a weapon. It is a warmth that cannot be taken. Far above, the first signs of surface light begin to appear, the faintest gray shimmer that marks the border between the deep and the living sea. The spatula pauses just before it, suspended between two worlds, the silent depths below and the bustling reef above. For a long moment, it hovers there, turning slowly. Its reflection flickers across the soft surface ripples. Then, like a breath being released, it breaks through. Up above, the morning sun pierces the water, golden and gentle. The spatula's own light joins it, merging into a radiant halo that spreads through the waves. Sea flowers bloom open in the new warmth. Fish weave through beams of light that dance like silk ribbons. And far below, though the forge is silent, a single pulse of gold flickers once the blacksmith's blessing carried upward with the tide. The spatula rises until it finds itself drifting over a familiar reef, the one that will one day become Bikini Bottom. But for now, it is wild, untouched, a forest of coral spires, kelp gardens, and drifting sea foam. The spatula lands gently among the coral, nestling itself in soft sand as though tucking in for rest. Its glow dims, slightly not gone, but patient, waiting. Waiting for hands that will use it not to conquer, but to care. The sea resumes its quiet rhythm. Waves roll above. The forge's hum is gone, but its song lingers faintly in the currents. A promise hidden beneath the sound of the ocean itself. Generations will pass before that promise is remembered again. Seasons come and go without clocks, only marked by the soft migrations of jellyfish, the slow breathing of the tide, the rise and fall of the moonlight through the waves. The golden spatula lies at rest through it all. It becomes part of the reef, half buried in soft sand, coral growing gently along its edge. Fish swim past without noticing. Sometimes a curious one pauses, feeling a faint warmth, but moves on, forgetting what it felt almost instantly. For a long time, that is how things remain. Quiet, dreaming, waiting. Until one night, something changes. The sea darkens under a storm. Thunder rolls above, muffled, distant but powerful enough to shake the upper reefs. Lightning flashes, splitting the surface light into veins of white that pierce down into the deep. The shock travels through the water, stirring the old sand where the spatula sleeps. And from that golden shape beneath the coral, a spark of light flickers once more, not bright, but alive. The spatula's heartbeat begins again, slowly, steadily, like an echo answering the thunder from above. The ocean listens. The next morning, when the storm passes, a small group of sea dwellers swims near the reef. Primitive beings, not yet fish as we know them, not yet creatures of thought. They are soft-bodied, curious, drawn by instinct more than mind. They sense something different in the water, a warmth, a hum, and follow it. They find the golden spatula. It rests half buried in the sand, glimmering faintly. The creatures circle it, unsure. Their simple minds feel only wonder. To them, it is the first beautiful thing they have ever seen, something that shines without hunger, without threat. They hover there for a long time, swaying gently with the current. Then, one by one, they lower themselves to the sand surrounding the spatula in a perfect circle. And there, under the calm after the storm, the first ocean ritual begins. They do not know why they stay. They do not know what they worship, but they feel peace. Days pass. The current brings more creatures. Some are larger, more aware, drawn by the faint hum that now echoes softly through the water. A new kind of coral begins to grow nearby, pale gold, shimmering faintly as though touched by the spatula's light. Tiny shrimp build homes in the coral. Fish lay eggs there. A small ecosystem forms, glowing softly in the dim ocean light. The reef becomes sacred without meaning to be, and slowly stories begin, not told in words, but carried through the movements of creatures, passed from generation to generation. Each time one drifts near the golden reef, it pauses, moves slowly, breathes deeper as though reminded of something gentle. By the time centuries pass, the spatula is no longer just an object. It is an idea. Far above, the ocean changes again. Land rises and falls. Volcanoes form islands that will one day shape the surface world. Below, the sacred reef grows vast, now inhabited by creatures that can speak, think, and dream. They tell tales of the light beneath, a golden flame said to live in the sand, guarding those who feed the hungry and protect the weak. Some say it was a weapon of gods. Others say it was a heart fallen from the stars. But the elders, the ones who truly listened to the currents, said something else. It was made not to conquer, but to care. And though few understood what that meant, the word stayed. A tribe of ancient sea folk, half crustacean, half human in shape, claimed the reef as their home. They build small shrines around the golden light, made from seashells and volcanic glass. They name it the heart of the ocean fire. Once each moon they gather and hum in low tones, mimicking the rhythm of waves against stone. The sound carries through the water, vibrating through the coral, echoing down to where the spatula lies hidden. And each time they sing, the spatula glows faintly in response, as though remembering the forge's hum. It is no longer just a relic. It is alive, quietly feeding light into the sea. But as with all sacred things, peace cannot last forever. A shadow grows in the distance, a clan of hunters from the volcanic plains beyond the reef. They hear of the glowing treasure, and greed sharpens their hearts. One night they come. Spears made of obsidian, eyes hard as broken shells. They dive deep, following the golden shimmer. ignoring the warning songs of the reef dwellers. The sea grows cold as they descend. When they reach the sacred ground, the light blinds them for a moment. The spatula's glow has never burned so bright. But they do not stop. They dig through the coral, tearing apart the living reef. The song of the sea people turns from harmony to sorrow. In a frenzy of motion, they wrench the spatula free. For a heartbeat, silence falls. The moment the spatula leaves the sand, the ocean gasps a single deep current that sweeps through the trench like wind through a forest. Then darkness. The light vanishes. The reef turns gray. The hunters, triumphant, clutch the golden object and swim upward, carrying it toward the surface. But the ocean remembers balance. As they rise, the currents twist. A rift opens a whirlpool formed from sorrow and anger. The hunters scream as the sea pulls them down. Their spears shatter. The spatula slips from their grasp, spinning through the churning dark. And then as suddenly as it began, the storm ends. The ocean grows still. The spatula drifts once more deeper this time, far below the reach of any creature or light. It settles among broken stone and quiet sand. For a while, nothing moves. Then softly, its light returns, dim but steady. It forgives. The ocean, too, forgives. The reef above, though scarred, begins to regrow. New coral forms. The gold fades, but the warmth remains invisible now, hidden in the hearts of the sea folk who survive. They tell stories to their children about the day the ocean cried and how the light forgave them. And though the spatula is lost again, the legend deepens. 1,000 tides later, the reef becomes part of a greater world, the one that will one day hold the Krusty Krab, the jellyfish fields, and SpongeBob's little pineapple home. But even then, the warmth still lingers beneath the sand. Sometimes on quiet nights, when the sea is calm and the moonlight reaches deep enough, the faintest shimmer can be seen on the ocean floor, a whisper of gold, pulsing like a heartbeat. The centuries roll by like waves, slow, endless, gentle. The ocean changes faces again and again. Where volcanoes once rumbled, coral gardens bloom. Where great predators once roamed, schools of harmless fish now dance in spirals. The forge beneath the waves has long gone silent, but the warmth of its creation still echoes faint and patient. At the very bottom of the world, buried in golden sand and memory, the golden spatula sleeps. It is not dead. It is only waiting for laughter. Far above, in the living ocean of Bikini Bottom, the present hums like a lullaby. The Krusty Krab stands proudly under the warm afternoon sun. Seagulls cry overhead. Bubbles rise lazily past the old neon sign. Inside, the sound of a spatula against the grill fills the air, soft, rhythmic, comforting. The golden spatula is here again. But how? It glimmers faintly in SpongeBob's hand, the same warmth that once pulsed through the depths, now alive again in a simple kitchen of joy. To anyone else, it's just a shiny tool. To the ocean, it's a song returned home. How it came to rest in SpongeBob's hand is a story of destiny woven in foam and time. Long ago, a single current from the deep forge drifted upward, carrying particles of gold like tiny sparks of memory. They mingled with sand, with coral, with the passing shells of wandering creatures. Each grain of that golden dust carried purpose fragments of kindness, care, patience. Over time, those fragments gathered near the shore, drawn to warmth. When the first builder in Bikini Bottom forged the new spatula for the Krusty Krab, he used sand from that very shore, never knowing it shimmered faintly at night. He poured it into the mold. polished it till it gleamed, and sold it for a handful of clams. That was how the Golden Spatula was reborn, shaped again, not by gods or storms, but by the quiet hands of an ordinary worker. It waited again this time, not for worship, but for the right heart. And that heart was SpongeBob SquarePants. When SpongeBob first held it, the spatula recognized him instantly. The warmth bloomed through the metal, pulsing with the same rhythm as his cheerful heart. SpongeBob gasped, wide-eyed. "Whoa, you're warm," he said, smiling as though meeting a friend. From that moment on, every Krabby Patty he flipped carried the echo of the forge's old promise to create not for greed, but for care. He never knew that the gentle heat in his hand wasn't just from the grill, it was the ocean's blessing, awakened by laughter. Every swirl of bubbles, every hum of his little tune, stirred something ancient and kind in the water. The blacksmith's spirit, that old jellyfish-shaped being who once forged it, still watches from the deep, its form now translucent and vast as the horizon. It hums softly when SpongeBob cooks. It hums with pride. Sometimes, when SpongeBob is alone in the Krusty Krab after hours, cleaning the grill with sleepy eyes, the spatula glows just slightly brighter. The light flickers through the windows across the silent sea. Jellyfish drift near, curious. Gary, back home in his shell bed, feels the warmth too faint, but cozy and purrs softly in his sleep. That warmth travels farther than the kitchen walls. It slips through the current, through the coral caverns, and down to the trench where the ancient forge still lies dormant. There, beneath layers of coral and silt, the long, cold stones shimmer once more. The forge breathes one quiet exhale after thousands of years. It recognizes its child alive again, doing exactly what it was made to do. Not to fight, not to rule, but to care. The ocean listens. The hum of SpongeBob's cooking, the laughter echoing from the Krusty Krab, the happy shouts of "order up" all become part of the water's rhythm again. Fish from far away can feel it, they can't explain why, but meals taste a little better, days feel a little lighter. Even Squidward, grumbling in the corner, sometimes finds himself humming along without noticing. And every time he does, the Golden Spatula gleams softly in approval. Mr. Krabs, counting his money, has no idea that true treasure glows right beside him. The spatula doesn't mind. It has learned patience. One evening after closing time, SpongeBob sits at the counter, chin on his hands, looking at his golden spatula under the warm kitchen light. He smiles faintly and whispers, "You know, buddy, I don't think I could do this without you." The spatula gleams once, as if to say, "You never were." Outside, the ocean sways in calm twilight. The sky above glows in amber tones, reflecting gold across the waves, the same gold born from the forge long ago. The light travels down through the sea, dancing over rocks, coral, and sand. It finds the old cavern once more. The forge flickers faintly, alive in memory. And for the first time in an eternity, the hum returns slow, deep, steady. The blacksmith's voice, soft as current, drifts through the water. The sea remembers every kindness, every meal made with love, every laugh that warms the tide. The golden glow pulsed one last time in the quiet forge, soft and patient, as if taking a final breath. The blacksmith, that vast, jellyfish-like being of molten calm, lifted the shining spatula with both tendrils. The ocean itself seemed to still. For a long moment, nothing moved. Even the drifting sand held its breath. The forge, carved from coral and volcanic stone, was silent, except for the gentle hiss of bubbles escaping the vents below. Then, with slow grace, the blacksmith turned toward a coral altar at the heart of the forge. It was ancient, overgrown with memory, each curve of shell and coral telling stories of the sea's beginnings. He lowered the spatula upon it, and the light that radiated from it shimmered across the water like rippling sunlight. No words were spoken, but the ocean understood. This was not a weapon. It was a promise to bring warmth, not destruction, a promise to serve, not to command. The golden spatula hummed softly in reply, not a sound but a feeling, like a heartbeat spreading through the current. The blacksmith. The keeper of creation gazed at it for the final time. His form flickered like jellyfish light, fading in and out of visibility. The molten lines that ran through his translucent body dimmed, one by one, like embers cooling after a long, noble work. He whispered, not in voice but in current, a farewell that rippled out in every direction. The sea will carry you. When kindness finds you again, awaken. And with that the forge dimmed. The golden light rose, slow and steady, carried by the soft pull of a warm current. The ocean around it transformed into an endless swirl of blues and golds. The spatula spun gently, catching light that filtered down from the surface, as if the sea itself wanted to admire what had been born. It drifted past glowing reefs and sleeping leviathans, past canyons where whale bones rested like silent cathedrals. The water shimmered wherever it passed, a trail of faint light following like memory. The spatula was no longer simply an object. It was alive, glowing with purpose. Every bubble that brushed its surface carried whispers, stories of the ocean's dreams, fragments of song from distant tides. It floated past a gathering of jellyfish, their tendrils glowing faintly as if bowing in reverence. A school of small golden fish followed it for miles, drawn by something they couldn't explain. As it rose closer to the light, the world changed around it, centuries flickering like waves, time bending gently in the current. Civilizations rose and fell on the seafloor. Coral towers grew, flourished, and crumbled into dust. Whole ecosystems lived, loved, and passed into memory. And through it all, the golden spatula drifted patiently waiting, not searching. It never rusted. It never dimmed. Sometimes, when a creature of the deep performed an act of kindness, a mother sea snail sheltering her young, a jellyfish protecting a lost fry, the spatula would pulse faintly, a soft golden heartbeat glowing across the sand. Each pulse was a note in the ocean's eternal lullaby. At last, after countless tides and seasons, it came to rest in a shallow tide pool near what would one day become Bikini Bottom. The pool was calm, cradled by coral ridges and sunlit sands. It wasn't grand, not a temple, not a kingdom, but it was warm, and the spatula rested there, half buried, gleaming faintly beneath the soft waves. Above, the sky shimmered through the water's surface like glass. Tiny crabs scuttled by. Anemones swayed in rhythm with the sea. It felt peace. It had known the hum of creation, the fire of the forge, and the vast loneliness of drifting. Now, for the first time, it felt something simpler belonging. The tide came and went, brushing it with sand, softening its edges. Time became meaningless. Centuries later, the first builders and cooks of the sea would find pieces of strange gold in the same sands. They used it to craft their tools, their stoves, their homes, never knowing that each fragment still carried a faint warmth, still pulsed with memory. The golden spatula itself remained untouched, sleeping quietly under the coral. and whenever the moon rose full, its light would catch the waves and reflect through the pool, landing perfectly on the spatula's surface. It would glow faintly, like a single golden thought waking from a dream. Then one day, everything changed. A gentle current passed through the reef, carrying laughter. It was soft at first, bubbly, bright, innocent, but it echoed through the water like a song the sea had long forgotten. The spatula stirred. Its golden sheen brightened ever so slightly. The laughter continued SpongeBob's laughter. It had returned. The ocean currents swirled like recognition, a pulse of ancient joy shaking through the reef. Somewhere far below, the old forge hummed once again, sensing the call. And on the shore of Bikini Bottom, the sound of sizzling patties began. Cut to present-day SpongeBob in his familiar kitchen at the Krusty Krab. He flips a Krabby Patty with his ordinary silver spatula. Steam rises in gentle curls. He hums a little tune, the same one he's hummed every day since forever. The golden light flickers faintly at the edge of the frame, not from the stove, but from the spatula itself. It's almost imperceptible. The glow fades and returns with each flip, like breathing. He doesn't notice. He just keeps cooking, happy, patient, full of care. The glow builds slightly, like a heart remembering itself. In that moment, across the ocean, the blacksmith's long-forgotten forge stirs. Tiny golden bubbles drift upward, echoing SpongeBob's rhythm flip, hiss, hum, smile. Each movement he makes mirrors the same precision, the same love that once shaped the golden spatula. He doesn't know it yet, but every Krabby Patty he cooks is a continuation of that ancient craft, the transformation of warmth into kindness. The same light that once shone from the deep now flickers softly through his hands. He pauses for a moment, looking at the glow from the grill. It reflects in his eyes, soft, golden, gentle. SpongeBob smiles to himself. Feels like a good day to make someone's lunch a little happier, he whispers. Outside, sunlight filters through the ocean currents, scattering into a million golden threads. Each one seems to connect back to the same tide pool, where the true golden spatula still rests, a silent witness to its own legacy living on. The water hums. The blacksmith's voice, deep and distant, echoes faintly across time. Kindness never rusts. Flame fades, but care endures. The camera pans wide, pulling away from SpongeBob, from the Krusty Krab, from Bikini Bottom, out into the glowing ocean, where light and memory meet once again. And the spatula, deep in its resting place, glows faintly in reply. A soft pulse, a heartbeat, a promise continuing. The spatula drifted, carried gently by the softest of tides, its golden surface catching faint glimmers from moonlight that filtered through leagues of water. The ocean was quiet, as if the world itself had paused to watch the artifact's journey. Shoals of tiny fish darted past, curious, but none dared touch it. Every creature could feel the warmth radiating from it, not heat, but something softer, like a heartbeat that had learned how to glow. For years, the spatula wandered, through coral forests and past sleeping sea vents, over cliffs where old sea kings once ruled, and through valleys where ancient kitchens of stone still whispered of long-forgotten recipes. It saw everything and asked for nothing. Wherever it drifted, life seemed to stir, plankton shimmered brighter, sand crabs emerged to dance, and even old shipwrecks creaked like they were dreaming again. Then one quiet dawn, the golden spatula came to rest in a small tide pool, so small, in fact, that it seemed impossible for such a great relic to find its end there. The water there was shallow and still, cradled by soft coral and smooth pebbles. It was a forgotten corner of the ocean, where the hum of the world could barely be heard. But that was exactly what the spatula had been waiting for: stillness, patience, the kind of silence in which new stories begin. Centuries passed. The tide pool became a memory. Sand covered the golden surface, then time covered the sand. And above it all, the ocean moved on waves, rising, falling, changing, forgetting, until one day the current shifted again. The sand stirred just slightly, as if waking from a dream. Something in the deep had changed. A new laughter had entered the ocean, a kind of joy so bright and unafraid that even the seagrass turned toward it like plants to sunlight. That laughter belonged to SpongeBob SquarePants. He was new to the Krusty Krab, then fresh-faced, square, full of hope. He didn't know the history of the grill he stood behind. He didn't know that under the metal and grease and sizzling patties, there lingered echoes of that ancient forge beneath the waves. But the ocean did. It remembered. When SpongeBob first picked up his spatula, a simple silver one, something happened. The moment his hand wrapped around the handle, a faint hum rippled through the sea. Fish paused mid-swim. The lights in jellyfish fields pulsed in rhythm. Somewhere far beneath, buried under centuries of sand, the original golden spatula flickered, once a heartbeat returning. And though SpongeBob never saw it, the spatula's light stretched toward him, invisible threads of golden energy winding through the currents until they found the one whose heart matched their purpose. Kindness, joy, the love of doing something just because it makes others happy. That day, when SpongeBob flipped his very first Krabby Patty, the flame from the grill flared in gold for a single second. Squidward blinked, thinking it was just his imagination. Mr. Krabs didn't notice he was too busy counting money. But the ocean noticed. The jellyfish noticed. The sea whispered softly. The legacy has found its flame again. From then on, SpongeBob's every movement carried a rhythm, that same slow heartbeat from the forge. Every flip of a patty sent ripples through the water, every smile of his added warmth to the sea. Even when storms rolled through Bikini Bottom, his kitchen light never dimmed. He didn't know why his grill always burned just right, why his patties always landed perfectly on the bun, or why he never grew tired of the work. But the spatula knew. It had chosen him long before he was even born. Sometimes late at night, when the Krusty Krab was empty and the ocean outside was dark and calm, SpongeBob would stay behind just to clean up. He'd hum a quiet tune as he wiped the grill, the same lullaby-like sound the ancient blacksmith once sang beneath the waves. The melody had never truly left the ocean. It had simply waited for someone to remember it without ever knowing it. There were moments, soft, fleeting ones, when SpongeBob could almost hear the sea whisper back. The hum of the water through the window, the bubbling of the fryer, the slow, even pulse of the lights. It all sounded like breathing, like the ocean itself was alive, content, watching over him. And in those moments, he'd look at his spatula, shiny, ordinary, maybe even a little dented from years of flipping, and feel something deeper than pride, a quiet sense of belonging, as if every meal he cooked was a continuation of a promise made long ago that warmth and kindness should always have a home, even in the smallest corners of the sea. One night, as he closed the Krusty Krab after a long day, he held the spatula close to his chest and whispered, "Good night, buddy." The lights flickered softly in reply. And deep beneath the waves, far below Bikini Bottom, the ancient forge glowed faintly gold again, just once, then faded, content. The ocean's memory stirred with pride. The spatula had fulfilled its purpose, not by staying golden, but by becoming ordinary in the hands of someone extraordinary. There are days in Bikini Bottom when time seems to stand still. The waves outside the Krusty Krab move slowly, the sunlight pours through the windows in golden stripes, and even Squidward's sighs sound almost melodic. Those are the days when SpongeBob feels it most, that faint hum from the spatula. It isn't loud or obvious, more like a soft vibration in the water around him, a reminder that something ancient flows through his cheerful routine. He never talks about it, mostly because he doesn't realize it's unusual. To him, it's just the rhythm of the sea, the way the bubbles rise at the right moment. The grill warms just as he flips. The patties seem to leap willingly onto the buns. It all feels alive. And in a way, it is. Every Krabby Patty he makes carries with it a trace of that ancient warmth, the same golden essence that once shone in the forge beneath the waves. The sea recognizes it, and in return, it blesses him with grace. Even the jellyfish that buzz around the restaurant windows seem drawn to it. They float gently near the glass, pulsing their soft lights like candles, as if keeping vigil over an unspoken promise. One evening after closing, SpongeBob sat at his small corner booth with his spatula resting beside him. The night outside was calm, the moonlight laying silvery paths across the sand. He stared at the spatula's handle and thought about how much it meant to him. It wasn't just a tool, it was a friend, a part of him. He remembered the day he got it. He'd saved up for weeks, carefully collecting spare change, and finally walked into Bargain Mart to buy the best spatula for the best fry cook. It was shiny, simple, unremarkable. But when he first held it, something about it just felt right, like it was waiting for him. Back then, he didn't know that his heart, full of joy and care, would awaken something ancient, sleeping deep within the ocean's memory. He didn't know that each smile he gave to his customers was a spark that kept the sea alive with light. But the ocean knew. Far below the surface, where the currents moved slowly and the pressure was heavy enough to crush even coral, faint waves of gold still rippled from the ocean floor. The forge that had long gone cold would sometimes stir its stones, glowing dimly for a moment before resting again. The glow responded to SpongeBob's laughter, to the warmth in his songs, to the rhythm of his life. It was as if the ocean itself had chosen him not to be a hero, not to rule, but simply to keep its spirit gentle and kind. One night, when a storm rolled across Bikini Bottom, SpongeBob found himself at the Krusty Krab long after everyone had gone home. Thunder rumbled faintly, muffled by the water above. He looked out the window and saw the sea swirling in slow circles, its color deep and green. The restaurant lights flickered once, and he held the spatula close, not from fear, but comfort. He whispered softly, "We'll be fine, buddy. We always are." The storm outside answered not with violence, but with a strange calm. The waves slowed, the lightning dimmed. It was as though the sea itself bowed in respect. And for just a heartbeat, the spatula glowed faint, golden alive. SpongeBob blinked, surprised, and rubbed his eyes. When he looked again, it was just silver, ordinary still. He laughed it off. "Oh, must have been my imagination." But the ocean knew better. It had seen the light return. From that night on, the connection between SpongeBob and the sea deepened, even if he couldn't see it. His laughter seemed to carry farther. His joy lingered longer. In jellyfish fields, flowers bloomed brighter after his songs. In Goo Lagoon, the tide shifted softer when he walked by. Even Plankton's chum bucket seemed to flicker with a bit more warmth when SpongeBob passed. Every flip of the spatula was an offering, every meal a prayer, every smile a spark. And deep in the oldest parts of the sea, where time folds over itself like waves meeting on the shore, the ancient blacksmith stirred from his rest. He was not alive in the way creatures are. He existed in memory, in rhythm, in the pulse of the ocean's heart. His jellyfish-like form shimmered faintly in the golden dark as he listened to the distant echoes of SpongeBob's laughter. He smiled, or whatever the underwater equivalent of smiling might be. The spatula, his final creation, had not been lost. It had fulfilled its destiny not by being wielded in battle, not by being displayed as treasure, but by becoming part of something pure and kind. The blacksmith's hum returned, faintly a soft tune carried through the water, rising through coral tunnels, weaving past sleeping clams, and brushing lightly against Bikini Bottom's sandy streets. That night, as SpongeBob slept, the sound drifted through his dreams. He dreamt of the ocean glowing gold, of a forge beneath coral stone, of bubbles that rose like stars. And somewhere in that dream he heard the voice of the sea, calm, patient, proud whisper, "You'll carry the warmth that we once forged." He woke with a smile, not remembering the words, but keeping the feeling. When he looked at his spatula in the morning light, it seemed to gleam just a bit brighter, like it was happy to be awake too. As the day began, SpongeBob danced into the kitchen, humming the same tune the ocean had given him. And though no one else could hear it, the rhythm carried far past the restaurant walls, through the coral streets, out to the quiet ridges of the deep. There, the ancient forge pulsed one final time before settling into silence again, forever at peace. The legend of the Golden Spatula had come full circle. The gift of the grill had been passed, not by hand, but by heart. And in every sizzling patty, every shared laugh, every glimmer of warmth in the Krusty Krab, the ocean's memory continued to live. Morning arrived gently in Bikini Bottom. The sunlight filtered through the water like honey through glass, scattering warm beams over the sand. Jellyfish drifted lazily past SpongeBob's window, glowing faint pinks and blues, their movements slow, almost reverent. The Krusty Krab sign flickered on, and the familiar smell of fresh buns and sea salt filled the air. Inside, SpongeBob stood at the grill apron tied neatly, hat slightly crooked, his smile unshakable. He held the same old spatula in his hand, unaware of the golden shimmer that faintly glowed beneath the morning light. It wasn't always visible, only when the light hit it just right or when SpongeBob's laughter filled the air. As the first patty sizzled, he whispered to himself, "Ah, perfect. Just the right sound." The gentle hiss of cooking seemed to harmonize with the ocean, outside a melody both ancient and new. Steam rose in curls, catching the golden hue of the sun, as if time itself paused to listen. Squidward rolled his eyes from behind the register. "You're talking to your grill again, SpongeBob." But even he sounded less annoyed than usual, his voice softer, more tired than mean. SpongeBob just giggled. "Of course. You have to respect the art, Squidward. It's all about love, patience, and the right amount of flip." He spun the spatula between his fingers, graceful as a musician tuning his instrument. With every flip, with every small hum that escaped his lips, something in the restaurant felt lighter, the air, the light, the space itself. Even the greasy surfaces seemed to glimmer faintly as though reflecting not just light, but kindness. Outside, the ocean's current slowed. The jellyfish stopped in their tracks, pulsing in rhythm with SpongeBob's song. They hovered at the windows, drawn not by curiosity, but by memory, the same memory that lived in the sea's oldest depths. Mr. Krabs walked in, grumbling about counting pennies and competition, but when he caught sight of SpongeBob's smile, he couldn't help but pause. For a moment, the world felt right. It reminded him of his younger days when the ocean was bigger, quieter, and dreams were simple. He blinked away the nostalgia, coughed, and said, "Keep flipping, lad. We got customers coming soon." SpongeBob saluted proudly. "Aye, aye, Captain." But deep beneath the Krusty Krab, unseen and eternal, the ocean stirred again. The glow that once filled the ancient forge flickered faintly, not as fire, but as heartbeat. Each time SpongeBob flipped a patty, the golden pulse synchronized with his movements. Each laugh, each order up, echoed through the currents, keeping the ocean alive with warmth. There was no grand magic, no divine thunder, only a rhythm, steady and gentle. The ocean, for all its vastness, had found peace in simplicity in SpongeBob's endless kindness. That night, when the Krusty Krab closed and the streets grew quiet, SpongeBob stayed behind to clean the grill. He moved slowly, humming the same tune he always did, that same lullaby-like hum the ancient blacksmith once sang at the bottom of the sea. He didn't know where it came from, only that it made him feel safe. The sound traveled through the quiet restaurant, into the dark water beyond where it lingered among the coral and sand. When he finished, he placed his spatula on the counter and looked at it for a long moment. It wasn't new anymore. The shine had faded, the edges slightly worn, but somehow it looked even more beautiful that way. He smiled softly. "You've been with me through everything, huh?" Gary meowed from the doorway, sleepy-eyed and yawning. SpongeBob laughed. Okay. Bedtime, just one last look." He lifted the spatula, and for a split second, the reflection of the moon shimmered across its surface. Only this time, it didn't just reflect, it seemed to glow from within. A faint golden hue spread across the room, gentle and soft, wrapping everything in quiet light. SpongeBob blinked, and then smiled wider. "Wow, that's beautiful." He didn't question it. He didn't need to. He just stood there, bathed in light, feeling the warmth of the ocean in his heart. Then, as softly as it appeared, the glow faded, leaving behind only the soft hum of the sea and the ticking of the wall clock. He whispered good night to the grill, turned off the lights, and walked home. The path through Bikini Bottom shimmered faintly beneath his feet. The sand seemed to remember him, each grain whispering stories to the next. Somewhere deep below, the forge finally rested. The sea had given its gift, and now it slept peacefully. When SpongeBob reached home, he set the spatula beside his bed on the nightstand. Gary curled up beside him, purring quietly. Outside the window, the ocean pulsed faintly, not in waves, but in breath. The whole world exhaled slowly, softly, in rhythm with SpongeBob's dreams. In those dreams, he saw the golden spatula again, resting on a coral altar, surrounded by glowing bubbles. The ancient blacksmith stood nearby, his form shimmering like heat beneath the water. He said nothing, only bowed his head slightly. And then the golden light flowed from him into SpongeBob's hands, warm and endless. When SpongeBob woke, dawn had already begun to paint the sea in pale peach and rose. The spatula gleamed in the light. He smiled and whispered, "Let's make the world a little happier today." And so he did one Krabby Patty at a time. The ocean watched, as it always did. And those centuries would pass, waves would rise and fall, and legends would fade into bedtime stories. One truth would remain unchanged: that the warmth of the sea did not live in gold or fire, but in the heart of a fry cook who never stopped caring. The ocean was still that morning, a kind of stillness that felt alive, like the sea was holding its breath to listen. The sun filtered through the water in long, soft ribbons, illuminating Bikini Bottom in a sleepy glow. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was gentle, patient, the kind of light that made everything feel at peace. Narration began, soft as the tide. Not every hero carries a sword. Some carry a spatula. The words floated through the water as though the ocean itself whispered them. The camera drifted down to the Krusty Krab, where SpongeBob stood, humming happily, apron tied neat, hat slightly crooked. His golden spatula gleamed faintly under the kitchen's soft glow. There was no battle, no danger, just the sound of sizzling patties and SpongeBob's song. But there was something sacred about it, the rhythm, the devotion, the joy. He moved with care, every motion deliberate and kind. Each patty flipped not just for a customer, but with a quiet love that made even the smallest act shine. It wasn't about perfection. It was about warmth, about doing something well, not for glory, but because it made the world a little brighter. Outside, the waves rolled lazily over coral hills, and somewhere beneath them, a memory stirred. The same golden light that once filled the ancient forge flickered faintly in the deep, pulsing in sync with SpongeBob's laughter. As he worked, the narrator continued. The ocean remembers those who act with heart, and sometimes its memories take form not in stone, not in song, but in simple acts of kindness. The scene shifted into a soft montage vignettes of quiet heroism. First scene, SpongeBob kneeling beside a lost baby jellyfish, gently guiding it back toward jellyfish fields. His eyes shone with tenderness. Don't worry, little one, you'll find your friends again soon. The jellyfish pulsed once, twice, then a faint golden ripple passed through its body before it had drifted away. SpongeBob didn't even notice. He just smiled and waved. Second scene. Later, he scrubbed the Krusty Krab floors long after closing time, humming softly to himself. Clean floors make happy feet, he said cheerfully, unaware of the faint glow reflecting in the soapy water. Each brushstroke left a shimmer that lingered, then faded, like invisible blessings left behind. Third scene. The next morning, he saw Plankton struggling with his latest failed invention, a mini Krabby Patty theft robot tangled in its own wires. SpongeBob didn't laugh or scold. He just walked over, crouched down, and untangled it carefully. There you go, buddy. Maybe it just needs a little more love. Plankton blinked up at him, confused. Why would you help me? SpongeBob shrugged. Because you looked like you needed it. He walked away, humming. Behind him, the robot blinked once, and for just a second, its metal surface shimmered gold. The montage faded to slow motion, SpongeBob standing at the Krusty Krab counter, sunlight streaming through the window, spatula in hand. Each act, each smile, each small moment left ripples that traveled through the ocean like soft echoes. The sea itself seemed to shimmer faintly, as though every drop of water remembered his kindness. The narration grew fainter, more distant now, almost like a lullaby whispered through the coral caverns. Heroes are not made by battles, but by the love that endures between them. A soft current drifted through the Krusty Krab, brushing gently against SpongeBob's face. He paused for a moment, spatula midair, as if he'd felt something unseen. The light around him flickered the same golden hue that once danced through the ancient forge. It pulsed once, softly, like a heartbeat. Then again. He blinked, tilted his head, and smiled. That's funny. Must be the lighting. The camera zoomed out slowly. Through the window, the ocean currents twisted into slow spirals of gold, vanishing just as quietly as they appeared. Somewhere deep beneath Bikini Bottom, the old forge glowed once more, not with fire but with memory. A faint voice, the blacksmith's, hummed the same tune SpongeBob often sang while cooking. Two melodies, separated by time, now intertwined across centuries. SpongeBob looked down at his spatula, still ordinary, still scratched and worn from years of use. But as he turned it in his hands, a tiny shimmer caught his eye, a faint glow that traced the handle's curve. He whispered softly, almost shyly, "You're looking extra shiny today." He smiled, but behind that smile, something stirred, not pride, but gratitude. He didn't think of himself as special. He didn't see the hero the ocean saw. He just thought of how lucky he was to cook, to laugh, to share warmth. He took a deep breath, eyes softening. "Thank you," he said quietly. Not sure who he was thanking, maybe the sea, maybe life itself. Outside, the waves echoed back, a low, soothing hum, almost as if the ocean had said, "You're welcome." And for the briefest moment, the Krusty Krab glowed from within its windows, shimmering gold, its sign flickering in rhythm with the tide. It was not bright enough for anyone else to notice, but the sea saw. The sea always did. The narration returned one last time, for this part gentle, patient, timeless. In every small kindness, the ocean hears an echo of heroes. And sometimes those echoes find a home in hearts that never stop giving. The light faded. The music softened. SpongeBob flipped one last patty, perfectly cooked. Steam rose in elegant swirls, and in it, for just a heartbeat, the shape of a golden spatula appeared before dissolving into air. He didn't notice. He just smiled, placed the patty on a bun, and whispered, "Order up." The evening tide rolled in, slow and silver. The last customer had left, and the Krusty Krab was wrapped in a deep, peaceful calm. The golden light had faded to a soft blue, and the faint hum of jellyfish pulsed in the distance like ocean fireflies. SpongeBob wiped down the counter one last time, humming the same soft tune as always, a tune without words but full of feeling. Every note seemed to blend with the gentle rhythm of the sea outside. He turned off the lights, locked the door, and stepped out into the warm twilight. The sand crunched beneath his square shoes as he walked home, spatula in hand, like a knight returning from an unseen quest. As he walked, faint glimmers of gold followed his footsteps, tiny sparks rising from the sand, vanishing before he could notice them. It wasn't magic that sought to dazzle, only to remember. The narrator's voice returned, gentle as a breeze. When the heart is pure, even the smallest steps awaken the old light. The ocean never forgets those who walk in kindness. SpongeBob reached his pineapple house. Gary meowed softly from the window. "Evening, buddy," SpongeBob said, waving. "Guess what? I made the perfect Krabby Patty again today." Gary blinked slowly, unimpressed, but comforted, as always. Inside, SpongeBob set his spatula on the table. The camera lingered on it. A faint shimmer passed across its surface, a ripple like liquid sunlight. Then silence. He turned off the lamp and climbed into bed, the soft hum of bubbles surrounding him. As he pulled his blanket close, the scene slowed, and the sound of waves deepened lower, more ancient, more alive. Then a flicker of gold. It began small at the base of the spatula. The metal vibrated gently, humming a sound only the sea could hear. And from that hum, images began to form, faint, fluid, dreamlike. The walls of SpongeBob's room faded away. He was underwater still, but it wasn't Bikini Bottom. It was older, deeper. The water glowed with slow golden swirls. Shadows of coral pillars loomed above, engraved with runes that shimmered and faded like memory. A soft voice spoke, not from around him, but through him. "You carry the echo." SpongeBob turned, looking around. "Hello, is someone there?" His voice floated, small and curious. The golden current stirred again. A faint shape appeared, the outline of a figure, tall and steady, holding a hammer made of sea glass light. It was the blacksmith, the one from the old forge. But here he was only light and echo, moving like slow fire through water. SpongeBob gasped softly. I've seen you before. In my dreams, maybe?" The figure's voice came again, low and gentle. "Not dreams. Memory. The sea remembers through those who keep its kindness alive." The water shimmered with soft waves of light. All around, ancient shapes floated, glimpses of old heroes, each carrying their own form of courage. A mother tending coral gardens, a jellyfish healer guiding lost fish through dark trenches, a young fry giving away his only shell to shelter another. Every image glowed, then dissolved, leaving trails of gold that drifted toward SpongeBob. He watched in awe. "They're heroes?" "They are echoes," the voice said. "Every act of care leaves a light behind. Yours shines brighter than most." SpongeBob blushed, hands waving nervously. "Oh, I'm not a hero. I just make Krabby Patties and clean up a lot." The figure chuckled softly, the sound rippling like a warm current. "And yet, the ocean sings your name. That is no small thing." The golden forge appeared faintly in the distance, its walls half buried in coral and sand. The figure raised his hammer, and for a moment, the sound of metal striking metal echoed faintly clear, calm, steady. Each strike sent waves of gold through the water, rippling across SpongeBob's reflection. "Once I forged the spatula to honor those who fed others with open hearts," the voice continued. "But it was not meant for power. It was meant for remembrance, for those who serve with love." SpongeBob looked down at his hands, his square, porous, humble hands. He smiled faintly. "Then, I guess I've been holding history every day and didn't even know it." The figure nodded. The light around him pulsed once more. "The tool does not make the hero sponge of the square sea. The heart does." A soft current swept through, swirling around SpongeBob like a golden ribbon. He closed his eyes, feeling warmth bloom in his chest, not grand or mighty, but quiet and deep. He felt connected to the sea, to the past, to every gentle act ever done beneath the waves. Then suddenly the vision rippled. The golden light flickered and began to fade. SpongeBob reached out instinctively. "Wait, don't go. I still have so many questions." The blacksmith's voice was fading now, but still kind. "You don't need answers, little one. Just keep being who you are. That is enough." The light brightened once more, surrounding him completely. A final whisper. "In every smile you give, the sea remembers us all." Then silence. SpongeBob woke up. He was in his bed again, Gary snoring softly beside him. The room was still. For a moment he wondered if it had all been a dream. Then he saw the spatula on his bedside table, glowing faintly with golden light. He sat up slowly, eyes wide. The glow pulsed once, twice, and then faded, leaving behind a single golden speck, a light so small it could have been mistaken for dust. But it shimmered just long enough for SpongeBob to smile. He picked up the spatula gently, holding it to his chest. "Thanks," he whispered. "I'll keep making the sea proud." Outside, the current shifted, brushing softly against his window. The sea replied not with words, but with a deep, harmonic hum, the same sound the forge once made long ago. The camera slowly pulled back through SpongeBob's window, over the quiet houses of Bikini Bottom, and into the open water. Far below, in the ruins of the ancient forge, the faintest golden ember flared bright, alive, eternal. Narration faded in again, low and calm. Every kindness echoes, even when unseen. The ocean holds them all, the small, the quiet, the gentle. In these true heroism sleeps. The screen dimmed to soft twilight hues, the currents glowing like threads of memory weaving through the sea. And for a brief, lingering moment, a single image appeared, SpongeBob's reflection overlapping the blacksmith's. Morning came quietly to Bikini Bottom. The soft rays of sunlight filtered through the ocean's surface, painting the world in gold and blue. Bubbles drifted like dreams, carrying faint glimmers of yesterday's magic. SpongeBob woke slowly, rubbing his eyes. Gary was already awake, curled up in his shell like a sleepy pearl. The spatula lay beside SpongeBob's pillow, still faintly warm from the night before. For a moment he stared at it. No glow, no voice, just metal and handle. Yet when he held it, he could feel something. A hum, small but alive, like the ocean's breath resting in his palm. He smiled. Guess it wasn't just a dream, huh, Gary? Gary meowed softly as if agreeing. SpongeBob got up, ready to start his day. He put on his work clothes, straightened his tie, and polished his shoes, a simple ritual, but one he performed with care. When he stepped outside, the water felt different, lighter, brighter somehow. The seaweed swayed gently, and the coral blooms shimmered as though the ocean itself was smiling back. At the Krusty Krab, the day began like any other. Mr. Krabs was counting his coins, Squidward was sighing dramatically, and SpongeBob was flipping patties with cheerful precision. But today, something subtle was different. Every time the spatula touched the grill, the flame beneath shimmered gold for a moment, soft and pulsing, then gone. Each crabby patty came out perfectly round, steaming gently as if blessed by sunlight. Even Squidward noticed. He glanced over, squinting. Did you change the lighting in here or something? It's, annoyingly pleasant. SpongeBob laughed. Nope, just a regular day, Squidward. Isn't it great? Squidward groaned. You and your optimism. It's exhausting. Yet as he spoke, the faintest ripple of light passed through the restaurant, not enough to see clearly, but enough to feel. The customers smiled a little more. The jellyfish outside drifted slower, in rhythm with the ocean's pulse. Kindness was spreading unseen but unmistakable. When SpongeBob handed a patty to a hungry sea snail, he did it with both hands and a bright grin. The snail purred happily, and as it turned to leave, the small puddle beneath it glowed briefly like sunlight through glass. SpongeBob didn't notice. He was already cleaning a table, humming his soft tune again. The narrator's voice returned, calm and gentle. Heroes are rarely aware of their own light. They simply live it. As the day went on, that light began to reach others. A customer gave his last dollar to a friend in need. Squidward, in a rare moment of decency, held the door open for an elderly fish. Even Mr. Krabs paused, counting his money long enough to hand SpongeBob a pat on the back. Good work today, lad. You're worth more than gold. Though don't tell me, accountant, I said that. SpongeBob giggled, cheeks puffed out with pride. Thanks, Mr. Krabs. The sun outside was dipping low, turning the water amber. SpongeBob closed up the grill and wiped the counters one last time. As he lifted his spatula to hang it on its hook, he paused. The reflection on the metal wasn't his face. This time it was the faint silhouette of the blacksmith, hammer raised, smiling silently. SpongeBob blinked. When he looked again, it was gone. He stood there for a long moment, the gentle music of the ocean surrounding him. He whispered, "Still here, huh?" The spatula gleamed softly, not answering, but not silent either. That night, when he walked home, the whole town felt alive. The lamps along the coral street glowed a bit warmer. Patrick's Rock emitted a soft hum, like it too remembered something ancient and kind. Even Plankton, far off at the chum bucket, paused his scheming for a moment as a glint of gold flickered through his microscope. He frowned, unsure if it was science or superstition. Inside SpongeBob's pineapple house, everything was still. He placed his spatula on a small stand beside his bed. Not like a tool, but like something sacred. Then he sat at his window, looking out into the gentle swirl of the ocean. It was quiet. The stars above the waves shimmered faintly, their light filtering down into the sea. He thought about all the heroes he'd seen in his dream, the gardener, the healer, the young fry. He thought about the blacksmith in the forge. And then he thought about his own small life, making food, cleaning up, helping friends. It didn't seem like much. But in that moment, it felt like everything. "I guess," he whispered to himself, "being good doesn't need to be big. It just needs to be true." He leaned his chin on his hand, eyes heavy with sleep, still gazing at the glowing sea. The camera panned slowly outward, showing Bikini Bottom bathed in gentle light, the golden current threading through the coral streets like veins of memory. A voice, older now, maybe the blacksmith's, spoke faintly, echoing through the waves. The ocean's greatest treasure was never gold or gems. It was the warmth of simple hearts, those who gave without asking, those who cared without reason. The screen filled with swirling bubbles, the golden shimmer growing stronger. Each bubble held a reflection, a moment of kindness from SpongeBob's past. Helping Sandy fix her dome. Comforting Patrick during a storm. Forgiving Plankton after another failed plan. Feeding a stray jellyfish. Each act small, yet glowing, all connected by invisible threads of light. The bubbles rose higher, merging into one great wave of brightness. And as it flowed through the ocean, other creatures paused, sensing something peaceful in the current. The sea turtles slowed their swim. The clams hummed in harmony. Even the deep sea vents pulsed gently, like the heartbeat of the ocean itself. The light reached the farthest corners of the sea, even the ruins of the ancient forge. There, deep below, the broken anvil glowed faintly once more. The golden symbol carved into it, a circle, with a spatula-shaped flame in its center, shimmered like a sunrise. And in the silence that followed, a whisper passed through the water, almost like a song. The forge never sleeps. Its light lives on wherever kindness burns. Back in his pineapple home, SpongeBob drifted into dreams, unaware of the quiet miracle he'd set in motion. Gary snored softly beside him. The spatula glowed once, then dimmed, resting peacefully at his side. The current outside slowed, wrapping Bikini Bottom in a blanket of gold and blue. All was calm. All was remembered. The legend breathed again, not in ancient temples or grand stories, but in a single sponge's gentle heart. The ocean was still but not silent. Deep currents carried something unseen echo, gentle and steady, pulsing through the coral caverns and forgotten ruins. It was not the sound of waves or whale song. It was the hum of kindness, the rhythm of a small sponge's heart beating in time with the sea. Far beneath Bikini Bottom, the ancient forge lay dormant. Its molten glow had cooled long ago, its hammer stilled. Yet now, for the first time in an age, the gold within the coral veins flickered faintly. The sea itself seemed to breathe, awakening from a long, gentle sleep. SpongeBob stirred in his bed, unaware. Outside his window, the faintest light of morning filtered through the ocean's surface, turning the world soft lavender. He smiled in his sleep, mumbling, "Order up. Extra love on that one." Gary purred quietly beside him. The narrator's voice returned, a whisper, slow and deep. "Legends are not born from power, but from care. Even the smallest soul can awaken the oldest light." As dawn reached the upper waters, the glow from the forge traveled upward like a memory reborn. It seeped through coral, sand, and seaweed, brushing the shells of creatures, the fins of fish, the roots of ancient kelp. The light didn't burn, it comforted. Everywhere it went, the ocean sighed with quiet joy. Above, in Bikini Bottom, things began to shimmer. The Krusty Krab sign glowed faintly as though kissed by morning. Jellyfish floated slower, their tendrils glowing gold for just a moment. Squidward's clarinet, resting on his nightstand, hummed softly, producing one perfect note of harmony before falling silent again. The light passed through Patrick's rock, causing him to smile mid-snore. He dreamed of pancakes and stars, though somewhere in his dream he felt warmth, the kind that said, "You are part of something good." Even Plankton, still tinkering in his lab, froze as his microscope lens caught a beam of golden light. He blinked. "What the—" The beam passed through his tiny lab, brushing his antenna before fading. For one brief moment he smiled, not evil but real, before shaking it off. Must be the phosphorescent algae again. But deep down, a tiny seed of peace lingered. And in the quiet heart of all this, SpongeBob woke. He yawned, stretching his arms, blinking at the soft light spilling through his window. Something about the morning felt different. The air was warmer, the silence gentler. He got up, took his spatula from the shelf, and held it close. No glow, no hum. Just the feeling that it belonged in his hands as it always had, as it always would. He stepped outside his pineapple home. The world shimmered with a faint, dreamlike haze, the last breath of dawn meeting the first hum of day. Bubbles rose in slow, lazy spirals. Jellyfish glided in quiet circles overhead. Even the sand beneath his feet sparkled faintly. SpongeBob took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the soft ocean air. It smelled like salt and sunrise and hope. He whispered, "Good morning, ocean." A wave rolled gently past, as if answering him. He smiled and began his walk to the Krusty Krab. Each step left behind a faint golden print that faded almost instantly, dissolving into the sea. He didn't notice he was too busy humming his happy tune. The narrator's voice grew softer, more reflective, like a bedtime story ending. The golden spatula was never lost. It was never stolen, never forgotten. It simply waited for hands that served, not ruled, for a heart that gave, not took. Cut to the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob opens the door, the small bell jingling. Light streams in behind him, filling the restaurant with golden warmth. He ties on his apron, spins his spatula, and begins the morning prep. The grill sizzles softly. Steam rises like mist. Each patty he flips sends a ripple of calm through the room, invisible but real. Even Squidward, setting up the register, sighs a little less dramatically than usual. Mr. Krabs, peeking from his office, squints at the golden light spilling across the floor. "Blimey! This place looks like a treasure chest." SpongeBob giggles. "It is a treasure chest, Mr. Krabs. But instead of gold, it's full of happy tummies." Mr. Krabs blinks, speechless for a rare moment. Then, with a quiet chuckle, mutters, "Aye, lad. Guess you're right about that." The narrator continues, almost singing now, as gentle harp notes play beneath. And so the sea remembered. Not through stone, not through flame, but through every act of kindness, every small smile, every heart that dared to care. The camera drifts upward through the Krusty Krab roof, through the coral reefs, into the open blue of the ocean above. Golden rays pierce the surface, breaking into 1,000 shimmering fragments. Each fragment glows, forming shapes: a forge, a hammer, a flame, a spatula, all fading into light. Then, far below, the ancient forge flickers one final time. A single spark rises, floating toward the surface, passing through layers of coral and memory. It emerges into the daylight and drifts toward SpongeBob's spatula. As he flips one final patty, the spark lands on its edge, glowing bright for just a heartbeat, then vanishing into the metal. SpongeBob looks up, smiling without knowing why. He hums a tune that feels older than words, the same soft rhythm the blacksmith once hummed beneath the waves. The camera pulls back one last time, showing Bikini Bottom in the full light of morning. Everything alive, everything peaceful. The current drifts by, golden and gentle. The forge is gone, the myth is memory. But the light remains scattered, quiet, eternal. The narrator's final words echo low and kind. And so the Golden Spatula's tale lived on, not in legend's ire, but in laughter, in warmth, in the hands of those who make the world gentle again. The night had returned to Bikini Bottom, calm and wide, filled with the hush of a world catching its breath. Stars floated gently above the water, shimmering like tiny memories, each one whispering softly against the surface. The golden traces of the morning's light had faded, leaving behind a silvery blue calm that stretched endlessly across the sea. SpongeBob stood at his window, the soft hum of the ocean drifting in through the glass. His hands rested on the sill, still faintly warm from the day's work, and beside him lay his spatula, quiet, ordinary once again. Yet he could still feel something within it, not a glow, not a vibration, but a pulse, a memory, a warmth that lived beneath the metal. It was as if the spatula remembered something it could not say. Outside, the moon hung low, its reflection rippling across the water in twin colors, half gold, half blue, like day and night sharing a secret. SpongeBob smiled softly. There was a feeling in his chest, a mix of peace and longing, like hearing a lullaby from far away. He picked up the spatula and whispered, "You've been working so hard lately. Maybe we both deserve a little walk." He slipped on his nightcap, tied his square shoes quietly, and tiptoed out of the house. Gary blinked once from his bed of shells, murmuring a sleepy meow, before curling up again, bubbles rising from his mouth like dreams. The streets of Bikini Bottom were empty. Even the glowing signs had dimmed the Krusty Krab's neon letters, now just a faint outline under the moonlight. Jellyfish floated slowly above rooftops, their tendrils trailing in lazy arcs like silk ribbons underwater. The current was gentle tonight, carrying a low hum that sounded almost like breathing. SpongeBob walked through the soft sand paths, each step leaving a faint imprint that the sea gently erased behind him. He hummed quietly to himself, not his usual bouncy tune, but something slower, older. The kind of melody that felt like it belonged to the sea itself. As he reached the edge of Goo Lagoon, the world opened up before him, wide and endless. The moon shimmered across the surface, painting the waves in ribbons of silver and gold. For a long moment, SpongeBob simply stood there, the spatula clutched to his chest. The ocean air moved softly around him, carrying the scent of salt and thyme. He spoke quietly, almost afraid to break the stillness. "I don't know if anyone can hear me down there," he said with a small smile, "but thank you for everything." The spatula caught the moonlight, reflecting it faintly. He knelt in the sand, tracing little spirals with his finger. His voice was softer now, thoughtful. "I think I understand now. You weren't made just to cook. You were made to care, to make people happy, even for a moment." He paused, looking at the reflection of the moon rippling before him. "And maybe that's what I was made for, too." A gentle current rolled up to the shore, brushing against his shoes. It was warm, warmer than seawater should have been. He tilted his head, curious, then stepped closer. The waves seemed to glow faintly, just enough to illuminate his face. SpongeBob took a deep breath and dipped the tip of his spatula into the water. The moment the metal touched the surface, a ripple of gold spread outward, smooth, slow, and silent. It expanded across the lagoon, touching every ripple, every wave, until the entire shoreline shimmered faintly like a dream. The spatula pulsed softly in his hands. Not bright, not loud, just a heartbeat of light. It felt alive, but calm, like it recognized where it had come from. SpongeBob's eyes widened in wonder. He whispered, "You remember." The ocean answered not with words, but with motion. The waves rose and fell in a rhythm that matched the pulse of the lights. Soft hums echoed from beneath the surface, blending with the sound of the tide. It was as though the sea was breathing with him. Then came the faintest sound, a whisper, almost too soft to hear. It wasn't in his ears. It was in his heart. The sea never forgets its kindness. SpongeBob's breath caught. He looked down at the spatula, then at the glowing water around his feet. The words weren't frightening, they were gentle, like a lullaby spoken directly to his soul. He whispered back, "And I won't forget you." For a few minutes, he stood there silently, letting the waves roll over his shoes. The light from the water wrapped around him in soft spirals, forming a faint halo that shimmered in the night. It wasn't magic, not in the usual sense. It was memory returning home. Images flickered faintly in the glow shapes in the current that looked like stories. The ancient forge deep beneath the waves. The jellyfish blacksmith, his silhouette hammering patiently under molten coral light. The golden current that had carried the first spatula through time. Each image drifted like a dream, fading and reforming, not quite solid, not quite gone. SpongeBob watched, tears pricking gently at the corners of his eyes. They weren't sad tears, they were the kind that come when you finally understand something you'd always felt but never put into words. The sea wasn't giving him something new. It was returning what he'd always had. That warmth in his chest, the kindness in his works, it had always been a reflection of this same light. The golden spatula wasn't special because of its metal. It was special because of what it symbolized, the connection between care and creation. He let the spatula rest fully in the water now. The glow spread wider, coloring the waves with soft gold and blue swirls, like sunlight playing under glass. It reached far beyond the lagoon, out into the open sea, where distant coral towers shimmered for a brief, perfect moment. Bubbles rose slowly, surrounding SpongeBob like stars. He closed his eyes and listened not to the water but to the feeling beneath it all. It was calm, ancient, endless. When he opened his eyes again, the glow had begun to fade. But the warmth remained in his chest, in his hands, in the air around him. He smiled softly. "I think you're home now," he whispered. The waves lapped gently at the sand, as if nodding. The spatula no longer glowed, but it seemed lighter somehow, easier to hold, as though a great weight had finally lifted. The ripples of gold stretched out farther and farther until even the far edges of Goo Lagoon shimmered softly like sunlight caught in deep glass. For a while, the whole ocean seemed to breathe, each wave rising in a slow inhale, then sinking with a quiet sigh. SpongeBob stayed still, his hands resting in the water, feeling the faint pulse of warmth beneath his fingertips. All around him, the sea came alive with tiny motes of light drifting like fireflies underwater. They spiraled upward in graceful arcs, gathering near the surface where they reflected off the moonlight like constellations being born. It was beautiful beyond words, but it didn't feel distant or grand. It felt familiar, like a melody he had always known by heart. SpongeBob's voice came out as a whisper. "Is this what you've been keeping all along? All that kindness? All that light?" The ocean answered only through motion, small circular ripples moving outward in perfect rhythm with his heartbeat. Every ripple seemed to echo something moments long gone, yet still alive. For just a second, the shapes of those moments danced across the water. There he was, as a little sponge, cooking his very first patty, nervous, trembling, but smiling anyway. There he was again, helping Mr. Krab scrub the floors after closing time, laughing even though no one was watching. There he was, sharing a meal with Patrick under the moonlight, listening to the waves crash softly nearby. Each act of kindness shimmered faintly gold before fading back into the sea. And with each flicker, SpongeBob understood a little more. The legend wasn't just about a golden spatula forged from light. It was about the idea that goodness, real, gentle goodness, never truly disappeared. It flowed through time like the ocean current, always finding its way back home. That was the secret of the golden spatula. It wasn't made of gold. It became gold every time someone used it with love. SpongeBob smiled and dipped his head slightly as if bowing to the ocean itself. "Thank you," he said softly. The words barely louder than a sigh. "Thank you for trusting me with your story." The waves brushed against his knees now, gentle and rhythmic. Each one felt like a pat on the shoulder, like the sea was saying, "You've done well." He sat down in the sand, legs crossed, still holding the spatula loosely in his hands. The glow was fading, but instead of sadness, he felt peace, like a candle burning low at the end of a long, beautiful night. He gazed at the spatula's surface, and though it was now just polished metal for a heartbeat, he thought he saw the reflection of the jellyfish blacksmith, smiling through the shimmer of water. The wind shifted softly, carrying a low hum, that same hum he'd heard deep beneath the waves in his dreams. It wrapped around him like a lullaby. Bubbles rose from the water's surface, swirling upward in perfect spirals until they burst gently into the night air, leaving trails of gold dust that faded slowly into the dark. And then for just a moment, the ocean spoke again, not in words, but in feeling. A warmth spread from the water, up through his arms, through his chest, through his heart. It wasn't just light. It was love, ancient, quiet, patient love, returning to the one who had kept it alive through his own kindness. SpongeBob's eyes softened. "I'll keep taking care of it," he promised. "I'll keep flipping every patty with a smile. I'll keep being me." He laughed quietly, almost embarrassed. "Even if I do burn one or two." A wave rolled in, washing gently over his shoes, as if laughing with him. He leaned back on his hands and looked up at the stars. They seemed closer tonight, brighter, as though they were leaning down to listen. For a long while, he didn't move. The only sounds were the soft rustle of the tide and the gentle hum of the glowing sea. The world felt still not empty, but full in a quiet way, like everything had finally found its place. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw movement. Small, curious jellyfish drifting toward the lagoon. Their tentacles shimmered gold instead of blue, reflecting the same glow that had once filled the forge. They surrounded SpongeBob in a slow, graceful dance, pulsing gently in time with the waves. He reached out a hand, and one of them brushed against his palm. It felt like warm water, soft and alive. He laughed softly. "Hey there. I guess you remembered too, huh?" The jellyfish pulsed once in reply, leaving a faint spark of light on his fingertips. SpongeBob watched it fade and whispered, "Maybe you're part of him, the old blacksmith." The jellyfish hovered, silent, but the glow around them grew brighter for a second, as if answering yes. He sat there surrounded by them, dozens of glowing creatures, circling slowly in the moonlight. It didn't feel like a goodbye. It felt like a gathering, a quiet celebration of everything kind and small that had ever mattered. And in that circle of light, SpongeBob felt not like a fry cook, not like a hero, but something simpler, a keeper of warmth. Far out at sea, the water pulsed again, a distant echo, as though the ocean itself was smiling. After a while, the glow began to soften, blending back into the deep blues of night. The jellyfish drifted away one by one, their light fading like stars returning to the sky. SpongeBob stood slowly, brushing sand from his pants, the spatula still resting easily in his hand. He looked down at it one last time. It wasn't glowing anymore, but now he didn't need it to. The glow wasn't gone. It had just moved into him. He took a deep breath, the salt air filling his chest. The world around him shimmered faintly, the sea, the sand, even the quiet horizon, all seemed to hum with peace. Then somewhere in the distance he heard it, the first hint of dawn. A faint gold line stretched along the far edge of the ocean, separating night from morning. The stars above began to dim, their light replaced by the slow rise of new warmth. SpongeBob smiled, tucking the spatula under his arm like a cherished friend. "Guess it's time to get back to work," he said with a soft chuckle. "Can't keep the patties waiting." The sea rolled forward once more, brushing at his feet as if to say goodbye, or perhaps see you soon. He waved to it, then turned and began to walk home, leaving a trail of soft footprints behind him that the waves gently erased. The road back to Bikini Bottom was quiet, the kind of quiet that only exists before dawn. The coral street lamps glowed dimly, their light softened by the sea's slow-moving currents. As SpongeBob walked, he felt the warmth of the sea still pulsing faintly around him, not as a glow, but as a feeling, a deep, steady peace. The sand beneath his feet made the faintest crunch with every step. Above him, the sky had begun to change the blackness, thinning into soft layers of indigo and violet. The moon was fading now, but not gone. It lingered like a friend saying a gentle goodbye. SpongeBob passed by jellyfish fields where the soft shapes of sleeping jellyfish drifted lazily in the water. They still glowed faintly gold, tiny lanterns floating in the deep. He smiled, thinking about how even the smallest lights can carry a story, how even the simplest souls like him could hold something as big as the ocean inside. When he reached the familiar curve of his pineapple house, he stopped for a moment. The windows shimmered faintly in the pale blue light of morning. Inside, he could see Gary curled in a soft spiral, fast asleep, his shell rising and falling with slow, content breaths. The sight made SpongeBob's heart feel full, the kind of fullness that doesn't shout or shine, but simply rests, steady and warm. He stepped quietly inside, closing the door behind him with a soft click. The scent of cookies still lingered faintly from the night before, mixing with the salt of the sea. He set the golden spatula on his kitchen counter. It didn't shine anymore, but somehow it didn't need to. Even in its silence, it looked complete. SpongeBob poured himself a small glass of kelp milk and sat at the table staring at the spatula in thought. The hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the wall clock filled the air, ordinary sounds, but comforting ones. He took a sip and smiled, whispering to himself, "Not every light needs to be bright. Some just need to be kind." He let out a small laugh, quiet, sleepy, genuine. Then, with a soft yawn, he stood up, picked up the spatula again, and walked to his bedroom. He placed it gently beside his bed, next to a picture of him and Patrick, holding ice cream cones, both of them covered in sprinkles and smiles. Then he slipped under the blanket, pulling it up to his chin. The water outside his window rippled softly with the first hues of dawn. He closed his eyes, and in the half-dream before sleep, he thought he heard the voice of the sea, the same deep hum as before, faint but clear, saying thank you. When SpongeBob woke again, the room was full of morning light. Soft rays filtered through his window, cutting through the calm blue water with golden streaks. Gary was already awake, sitting beside him, blinking slowly. "Morning, Gary," SpongeBob said with a sleepy grin. "Guess it's another beautiful day." Gary meowed, curling up against him, and SpongeBob chuckled. He sat up, stretched, and glanced toward the spatula on his nightstand. The sunlight hit it just right, and for an instant it gleamed a small flash of gold, like a heartbeat of memory. He blinked, and it was gone, replaced again by the familiar metal sheen. But SpongeBob just smiled wider. He got dressed in his usual square pants, adjusting his tie with that proud little flick of the wrist he always did. Then, humming softly, he headed to the Krusty Krab. The streets were busier now, fish beginning their day. Coral shops opening one by one. Seahorses drifting past with baskets of kelp bread. Bikini Bottom felt alive, bright, ordinary. But in that ordinariness, there was a quiet magic, too. When SpongeBob pushed open the doors of the Krusty Krab, the familiar creak echoed warmly through the room. He breathed in the scent of salt, grease, and sizzling patties, the smell of home. The grill waited for him like an old friend. He walked behind the counter, picked up his spatula, and said softly, "All right, buddy. Let's do what we do best." He flipped the first patty with care, the sound of sizzling filling the silence. The golden spatula, or what was left of its spirit, hummed faintly as it moved, each motion perfect, effortless. And as he worked, that faint golden shimmer returned not bright, not burning, but soft, like the glow of a kind heart doing what it loves. Mr. Krabs peeked from his office, rubbing his eyes. "Up early again, eh, lad?" he said with a sleepy grin. SpongeBob turned with a proud smile. "Just couldn't wait to start the day, Mr. Krabs." "Ha! That's me, boy." Mr. Krabs chuckled, heading back into his office, muttering something about dedication worth a treasure chest. As SpongeBob worked, he glanced at the spatula in his hand, the same ordinary spatula he had always used. And yet now he knew what it really was, not just a tool, but a thread that connected him to everything good he'd ever done, to every act of kindness that had ever rippled across the sea. He flipped another patty, then another. Each one landed perfectly soft sizzle, puff of steam, a light golden crust. The rhythm of it was like a song now, one only he and the sea could hear. Outside the window, the waves caught the morning light, flashing faint gold in the distance. Every time SpongeBob looked up, he saw that shimmer, and it filled him with a calm he couldn't quite describe. He didn't need to understand it. He just needed to keep cooking, keep smiling, keep sharing warmth. A family walked in 2 fish and their little one, and SpongeBob waved, cheerful as ever. He served them the first patties of the day with his usual enthusiasm, the plates steaming gently as the scent filled the air. The little fish smiled shyly and said, "Thank you, mister." SpongeBob's heart swelled, and he knelt down to eye level. "You're very welcome. Remember to eat with a happy heart. It makes the food taste even better." As they laughed, a faint gold glimmer crossed the table for an instant, unseen by anyone but SpongeBob. It danced along the edge of the spatula, then faded, like sunlight sinking into waves. And for just a second, SpongeBob looked toward the sea, visible through the Krusty Krab's window, that endless blue expanse he'd once spoken to. It shimmered faintly in reply, and though he didn't hear words, he understood perfectly. The sea remembers. He smiled softly, turned back to the grill, and said, almost to himself, "Guess I'll just keep the story going." The sound of sizzling filled the air again, bright and steady. The morning rush began, laughter rising, orders piling up, but beneath it all, there was still that quiet hum, the hum of warmth, of legacy, of kindness echoing through time. And as the camera slowly panned back through the Krusty Krab's window, across the bright water and the waking coral reefs, the final narration whispered like a breeze through the sea. The Golden Spatula was never about treasure or power. It was about the hands that held it, hands that cooked with love, that helped without asking, that gave light to others just by being kind. And so long as there are hearts like his beneath the waves, the sea will always glow. The last image lingered the ocean, turning from gold to blue to endless light, and then faded to calm silence. The first light of morning stretched slowly through the water, long ribbons of gold and pink weaving across the quiet town of Bikini Bottom. The night had ended softly. No alarms, no sudden bursts of energy, just the kind of peaceful silence that fades into light like the last note of a lullaby. The waves rolled gently over the rooftops, carrying with them a faint shimmer, as if some memory of the legend still lingered in every drop. The ocean didn't roar now, it hummed low and content, a voice that had told its story and found peace. Inside the Krusty Krab, everything was still. The chairs were stacked neatly on the tables, the counters wiped clean. The grill, usually the loudest heartbeat in the building, waited silently, cold and gray. Dust motes floated lazily in the water like sleepy bubbles. Then, with a faint creak, the front door swung open. SpongeBob stepped in. He wasn't rushing, not this time. There was no frantic energy in his movements, only calm, steady purpose. His square pants were crisp, his tie neatly knotted, but his eyes held a softness, a quiet that came from understanding something deep. "Morning, Krusty Krab," he said with a gentle grin, flipping the light switches. The room filled not with harsh brightness, but with warm, golden glow, as if the morning sun itself had decided to join him. He walked behind the counter, his feet making faint thuds against the wooden floor. He could hear the ocean outside, calm, steady, and every sound felt part of something bigger. He tied on his apron, adjusted his hat, and turned to the grill. For a moment, he just looked at it, as though greeting an old friend. Then, with a single, quiet breath, he lit the flame. The golden light of the stove flickered to life. And in that instant, something extraordinary happened, not loud, not bright, but meaningful. The flame reflected off the spatula resting beside the grill, the same one from the night before. It caught the light and shimmered faintly, gold dancing through the silver like a heartbeat coming alive again. SpongeBob didn't gasp or flinch. He simply smiled, nodding as though to say, "Good morning." The warmth spread through the kitchen, filling it with that same peaceful glow that once surrounded the forge beneath the sea. The smell of salt, oil, and fresh sea air began to mix again, the scent of a new beginning. SpongeBob moved slowly, gracefully, almost meditatively. Every motion carried intention. He reached for a spatula, dipped it gently in oil, and let the surface shimmer before setting the first patty on the grill. The sound filled the Krusty Krab, soft, perfect, alive. The first Krabby Patty of the day was always special, but this one felt sacred. As it cooked, the light from the window grew brighter, gold rippling across the counter, over the walls, into every corner of the room. Outside, Bikini Bottom began to wake. A few jellyfish drifted past the windows, glowing faintly. A snail slithered lazily over a coral fence. Far off, the faint echo of seagulls, distant but warm, floated through the water. SpongeBob flipped the patty with his usual flourish, the motion smooth and practiced. For just a moment, the oil reflected not just his face, but something else, a faint image of the golden forge, of the jellyfish blacksmith, of glowing coral and molten purpose. It was there and gone in a blink, like a dream remembered at dawn. SpongeBob looked at the reflection, his eyes soft. He didn't need to understand it completely. He simply whispered, "Thank you." Then he smiled, that same bright smile that could melt the hardest frown in Bikini Bottom, and placed the patty onto a perfectly toasted bun. He stood there, holding the finished Krabby Patty in his hands. The golden light played across its surface, the lettuce, the tomato, the sesame seeds shining like tiny suns. It wasn't just food. It was a continuation, the living warmth of the Golden Spatula's tail carried into every bite. SpongeBob placed the plate on the counter and took a step back, admiring his work. "Looks good," he said softly. "Real good." He glanced again at the spatula beside him. The faint glimmer along its edge pulsed once, almost as if it approved. At that moment, Mr. Krabs entered, humming a cheerful tune. "Ahoy, me boy! Up bright and early, I see." SpongeBob turned, smiling. "Good morning, Mr. Krabs. Couldn't miss the sunrise." Mr. Krabs looked out the window, squinting at the soft golden light flooding the sea. "Aye, that's a fine one, that is. The kind that makes you feel rich just looking at it." SpongeBob chuckled. "You know, Mr. Krabs, I think today's a lucky day." Mr. Krabs nodded. "Aye, lad. Every day's lucky if you open your eyes early enough to see it." They both laughed gently, the kind of laugh that doesn't echo but warms the air. Then SpongeBob returned to the grill, flipping another patty with that quiet rhythm that was half habit, half art. Each flip sent a shimmer of light through the kitchen. Each sizzle felt like a soft heartbeat under the sea. As he cooked, the camera slowly panned through the Krusty Krab, the chairs still stacked, the sign still reading, "Open soon." And yet, it already felt full of life, of warmth, of unspoken stories. The golden light through the window began to shift, deepening into the bright hues of morning. Customers would come soon, hungry fish, familiar faces, laughter, chatter. But for now, there was only SpongeBob and the golden calm that filled the air. He flipped one last patty, humming under his breath, the same soft tune that had echoed through the ocean in the legend, the forge's melody reborn in the kitchen of a fry cook. He didn't know where he'd learned it. Maybe it had always been there. Maybe it was the sea itself humming along. He stacked the patties neatly, lined up the buns, and cleaned the counter, every motion graceful, deliberate. When he was done, he paused, resting the spatula gently against the side of the grill. He looked at it with quiet gratitude. "You've been through a lot, huh?" he whispered with a soft chuckle. "Yes, we both have." The spatula didn't glow this time. It didn't need to. It simply rested, gleaming faintly in the sunlight, its story now part of the everyday rhythm, the ordinary made extraordinary. SpongeBob stood by the window, gazing out over Bikini Bottom. The town shimmered under the new morning coral glistening, shells catching light, bubbles rising lazily. The water itself looked golden, alive. He breathed deeply, his chest rising with calm pride. That was what it all meant, not fame, not power, but peace. The kind that comes from loving what you do and doing it well. Outside the Krusty Krab, the first true rays of the sun stretched across the seafloor, lighting up the town like a painting slowly coming alive. Bikini Bottom was waking soft and slow, as if savoring its first breath after a long, tender dream. The buildings glowed with pastel reflections, blues melting into golds, pinks into gentle oranges. The currents carried the warmth from the horizon, weaving between coral gardens and seashell paths. Every window caught a little of that light, and for a moment, everything sparkled as though the ocean itself had turned to honey. A jellyfish drifted lazily past the Krusty Krab sign. It pulsed gently, leaving behind tiny flecks of light that shimmered like golden dust. Inside, SpongeBob noticed it through the window and waved. "Good morning," he said cheerfully, even though he knew the jellyfish couldn't hear. It floated away, leaving behind a faint trail that lingered for a heartbeat, then faded. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly outside. Squidward, still half asleep, trudged along the path, his eyes half-lidded, a steaming mug of kelp coffee in one hand. When he opened the door, the bell chimed softly. Not loud, just enough to sound like a greeting. "Morning, Squidward," SpongeBob called out brightly. Squidward blinked, his usual grumpy expression forming automatically. "It's too early for your enthusiasm, SpongeBob," he muttered, setting his coffee down and sliding behind the counter. SpongeBob just laughed softly, flipping another patty. "But it's never too early for breakfast, or beauty, or the beautiful smell of a perfectly grilled Krabby Patty." Squidward sighed, stirring his coffee. "You and your poetic love affair with grease." He glanced at the spatula on the counter, catching a faint gleam of light running along its edge, and frowned. "You polished that thing again?" SpongeBob paused. He looked at the spatula, then back at Squidward, smiling gently. "Nope. It just shines on its own sometimes." "Uh-huh," Squidward said flatly. He took a slow sip. "I'm sure it does." The two of them worked in companionable silence for a while, SpongeBob humming, Squidward quietly sipping his coffee, the soft sizzle of the grill keeping rhythm with the heartbeat of morning. From the doorway came a sudden shout. "Ahoy, boys! Ready for another profitable day?" Mr. Krabs stepped in, clutching a small, polished wooden chest under one arm. His eyes were gleaming brighter than the sunlight outside. "Would you look at that sunrise, lads? It's like gold dust floating in the water. Makes me heart flutter like a treasure chest, full of doubloons." SpongeBob laughed. "It's beautiful, isn't it, Mr. Krabs?" The whole sea looks happy today." Mr. Krab sniffed, puffing his chest out. "Aye, it does. Must be a sign of good business." Then, noticing the patty on the grill, he added, "And a sign you're already hard at work, me boy." SpongeBob nodded proudly. "Always, sir. The day's first patty is special. It sets the mood for everything that follows." "Aye, lad. Spoken like a true cook." Mr. Krabs thumped him on the back, sending a small puff of bubbles floating upward. "Now let's make this a day to remember." As the morning passed, customers began to arrive, familiar faces, old friends. Larry the Lobster ordered his usual protein deluxe. Pearl popped in before school for a seaweed smoothie. Mrs. Puff came for her calm breakfast sandwich, chatting kindly with SpongeBob while sipping coral tea. Every order, every greeting carried a small spark of joy. SpongeBob worked with lightness, not the frantic energy he sometimes had, but a graceful calm that seemed to flow through everything he did. Even Squidward noticed, though he'd never admit it. There was something different about the day, not louder, not busier, just brighter. The sunlight streamed in through the Krusty Krab's front windows, cutting through the water like golden ribbons. Each time SpongeBob flipped a patty, the oil shimmered the same way the ocean had shimmered at Goo Lagoon the night before. He moved like a musician now, every motion part of a rhythm. The spatula danced between his fingers, the grill hissed in harmony, and the sizzling patties sang their soft, savory song. To the customers, it looked like cooking. But to the sea, it was remembrance. From outside, bubbles drifted up from the sand, glinting faintly gold. Tiny creatures swam by, their movements slow and content. Even the currents seemed to flow more gently today, swirling around the Krusty Krab as if guarding something precious. SpongeBob plated another patty, set it neatly on the tray, and slid it toward the counter. As he did, he caught a reflection in the stainless steel wall, the faint outline of the forge again, only this time softer, fading. The molten glow, the rhythm of hammer on coral, all blending into the sound of morning in Bikini Bottom. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The look in his eyes said everything. Gratitude, peace, and that quiet understanding that legends don't disappear, they just change shape. Mr. Krabs was busy counting coins. Squidward was sketching lazily on a napkin. Customers were laughing in the booths. Everything felt normal wonderfully, perfectly normal. And yet beneath that normalcy, there was something sacred. As SpongeBob flipped another patty, a small bubble rose from the grill and drifted upward. Inside the bubble shimmered faint gold, so faint it might have been just the light. SpongeBob smiled at it, watching as it floated to the ceiling and vanished. He whispered softly, "Goodbye, old friend." At that moment, the wind outside shifted a small current, brushing past the window. The golden rays flickered for just a moment, then steadied, warmer than ever. Squidward looked up. "Did you feel that?" "Feel what?" SpongeBob asked, still smiling. "That weird current, like the sea just sighed." SpongeBob turned toward the window. "Maybe it did," he said softly. "Maybe it's saying good morning." Squidward rolled his eyes, but even he couldn't quite hide the faint curve of a smile tugging at his mouth. The hours passed gently. The Krusty Krab buzzed with low chatter and laughter. Every now and then the light would catch the spatula on the counter just right, and it would gleam not as brightly as before, but enough to remind anyone looking that some stories never truly end. And when the breakfast rush slowed, SpongeBob wiped his hands on a towel and leaned against the counter. He looked around at the tidy booths and the smiling faces, the calm blue beyond the windows. It wasn't just another morning. It was the morning after something beautiful, the quiet that follows a song, when the last note still hangs in the air. He whispered to himself, "The sea remembers." The camera drifted slowly upward, catching the soft shimmer of sunlight on the spatula, the golden reflection spreading across the grill, up the walls, and finally spilling through the open door out into the ocean beyond. Outside, the town shimmered. The current carried that same light past the chum bucket, past jellyfish fields, past the edge of Goo Lagoon. Everywhere it went, the water seemed to brighten, if only little. The legend of the Golden Spatula wasn't gone. It was in every reflection, every laugh, every simple act of kindness that made the town feel alive. As the morning ripened, the soft hum of life returned to Bikini Bottom, slow, steady, and full of warmth. Boats drifted through the currents. Jellyfish floated like tiny lanterns in the water. Coral gardens shimmered as sunlight scattered across their branches. The sea had awoken, not with noise, but with quiet gratitude. It was as though every bubble, every current, whispered thanks for the kindness it had once known, the kindness of the blacksmith who forged a gift from care, and the kindness of the little sponge who carried it onward without ever knowing. The narrator's voice returned low, calm, and threaded with ancient rhythm. Not every story ends when its pages close. Some drift, like gold dust through the tide, waiting for the next heart to keep it glowing. Inside the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob finished serving the last breakfast patty. The grill hissed softly, the sound blending perfectly with the quiet waves outside. He took a slow breath and set the spatula down on the counter, fingers lingering on its golden edge. The sunlight caught it again, brighter this time, a flare that danced across the room before fading to a warm, gentle gleam. He didn't need to understand what it meant. He simply felt it, that strange, wordless connection between the ocean's memory and his simple, happy heart. He looked toward the window. The ocean stretched out, endless and calm. Tiny fish darted through the rays of light, their scales flickering like living embers. Somewhere in the distance, a school of jellyfish pulsed in perfect rhythm, their glow faint but steady. SpongeBob smiled softly. "It's a good morning, Gary." From home, Gary's faint meow echoed in his memory. SpongeBob chuckled and continued cleaning the counter. Every motion was calm, careful like a ritual. Wiping the counter, straightening a chair, humming a soft tune, each action carried a quiet reverence for the day ahead. Mr. Krabs peeked out of his office door, clutching a small coin between his claws. "You done in there, lad?" "Yes, sir," SpongeBob chirped. "Everything's ready for the lunch rush." Mr. Krabs nodded approvingly. "A fine worker, that's what ye are. The sea smiles on them who treat their tools with care." He said it without realizing how true his words were. SpongeBob just grinned, eyes glancing once more toward his spatula. The narrator continued, voice softer now, almost blending with the sound of waves. "The sea is old, older than memory. It forgets many things, but never kindness. The one who serves with joy, the one who gives without asking, those hearts are written in its currents forever." The camera panned upward past the counter, the sizzling grill, the gleaming spatula to the wide windows of the Krusty Krab. Outside, the sunlight had shifted fully now, no longer dawn's pinks and purples, but the clear gold-blue light of a new day. The scene widened, the restaurant glowing softly at the edge of town, the calm sweep of the ocean beyond, and schools of fish forming gentle spirals through the light. Bikini Bottom was peaceful, still small, still quirky, still home. A faint golden shimmer drifted through the current, unnoticed by anyone. It wound its way between coral and rock, over roads and rooftops, till it reached SpongeBob's pineapple house. Inside, Gary rested comfortably in his shell bed, blinking slowly as a single beam of light touched him. He purred softly and curled tighter, a tiny bubble escaping from his nose. The light lingered, then faded like a lullaby ending. Back at the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob hung his hat on the wall hook and leaned back, gazing up at the ceiling. The soft crackle of the grill had stopped, but the warmth remained. He could feel it not heat exactly, but something gentler, a quiet sense of peace, of something right. He thought about all the days before this one, the laughter, the burned patties, the silly songs, the friends who came and went. He didn't see himself as part of a legend. He just saw himself as SpongeBob doing what he loved, one patty at a time. But somewhere deep in the ocean, the legend still stirred. The ancient forge beneath the waves glowed faintly once more, a heartbeat of gold pulsing through its coral frame. No one was there to see it, no one except the sea itself. And as the current passed through it, carrying faint echoes of SpongeBob's laughter, the glow brightened for just a moment, then rested again, content. The narrator's voice returned for the final time softer, like a lullaby whispered through seashells. The Golden Spatula was never made to conquer nor to shine above others. It was made to remind that the smallest hands, guided by kindness, can carry the light of the sea. And so the tale drifts on through morning tides and midnight waves, finding new hearts to call its home. Cut 2. A close-up of SpongeBob's spatula resting near the grill. The light flickers over it, and for the briefest moment, a reflection forms the ancient blacksmith's silhouette, his jellyfish-like form bowing gently as if in gratitude. Then, with a pulse of golden light, it fades completely. SpongeBob hums softly, flipping one last patty just for himself. He places it on a plate, adds a pickle with care, and sits down at the front booth by the window. Outside, the sea ripples with the rhythm of a calm heartbeat. Tiny golden motes drift upward through the sunlight, scattering like dust in a sunbeam. He takes a bite of his patty and sighs happily. Perfect. The camera pulls back wide, wide, until the Krusty Krab becomes a small glow in the vast blue expanse. Above, the ocean's surface shimmers like liquid gold. The light bends, breaks, and scatters, forming shapes that might be memory, or maybe just the sea's way of smiling. The narrator's final line arrives tender, slow, like the last page turning. The Golden Spatula's tale was never about gold. It was about warmth, the warmth that lingers long after the flame fades, the warmth of a kind heart, still shining beneath the waves. As the words fade, the soundtrack shifts, a gentle melody carried on harp and flute, soft like morning tide. The final image. SpongeBob's eyes closed in contentment, sunlight bathing his face through the glass, his spatula gleaming faintly at his side. Fade out the light lingering on the screen until it turns white, then dissolving into the calm blue of the open sea. The golden light spread further now, filling the Krusty Krab until every corner shimmered softly. Not bright, not blinding, but comforting, like the glow of memory itself. Dust motes danced lazily in the air, catching the morning sun as if trying to hold it a moment longer before it drifted away. SpongeBob stood there quietly, the last echoes of the ocean's whispers fading in his ears. For a long time, he simply watched the light move across the walls. It felt alive, like the sea breathing through the morning. He turned to his spatula resting perfectly on the counter beside him. It was just a tool, simple and silver, a little bent from years of use. But as the sunlight touched it, the metal seemed to hum faintly. A warmth pulsed through it. subtle and deep, as though something ancient had awakened once more. SpongeBob smiled softly, unaware of the legend still living within that glow. He picked it up carefully, holding it in both hands. "Ready for another day?" he whispered, as if speaking to an old friend. The spatula gleamed a flash of gold rippling through the metal before it stilled again. The sound of sizzling batter came from the grill behind him, and SpongeBob turned to his task with a cheerful hum, his every movement unhurried and full of peace. The world outside the Krusty Krab stretched open wide, slow, and endlessly blue. The sun now rose higher, filtering through coral reefs and shipwrecks, touching every stone and shell with soft light. Fish darted in lazy spirals, their scales glinting like scattered coins. The sea, once whispering its ancient story, was quiet now, but that quiet wasn't emptiness. It was peace. The narrator's voice returned, calm and slow, like the tide itself. "And so the sea rests again, its tale told, its kindness passed on. The forge cools beneath the waves, the gold sleeps within a simple heart, and the legend breathes softly through morning light." A gentle current moved past the Krusty Krab, shimmering faintly. Tiny bubbles rose toward the surface, catching fragments of sunlight until they popped like fleeting stars. Inside, SpongeBob was flipping a fresh patty. He worked carefully, rhythmically, each motion matching the heartbeat of the sea. The sound of the spatula striking the grill echoed softly, like the distant hammer of the ancient jellyfish blacksmith. He stacked the patties neatly, smiling as the aroma filled the kitchen. "Just right," he whispered, a touch of pride in his voice. A breeze drifted in through the window, carrying with it the faintest trace of ocean song. SpongeBob didn't hear words, only a feeling, a warmth that brushed against his cheek and left him smiling wider. For a moment his eyes flickered to the horizon outside where the sun was breaking fully over Bikini Bottom. He stood there in the doorway of the Krusty Krab, spatula in hand, his silhouette bathed in gold. The waves glowed, the coral shimmered, and the entire sea seemed to pause, as if honoring him. Mr. Krab stepped out of his office, squinting. "Well, would you look at that, lad? Another day, another chance to make folks happy, eh?" SpongeBob nodded softly. "Aye, aye, Mr. Krabs." He said it with the same brightness as always, but there was something deeper in his tone, something calm, like a wave that had finally found the shore. Patrick strolled by the window, still rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Hey, SpongeBob, did you hear? I had a dream about a giant golden waffle." SpongeBob giggled. "That sounds delicious, Patrick." Patrick grinned, half awake. "It told me I should always share my snacks." "That's a good dream," SpongeBob said gently, waving his spatula like a salute. As Patrick wandered off, humming to himself, SpongeBob returned to the grill. The light through the window shifted again deeper now, warmer. He felt it settle on him like a blessing. The camera drifted slowly around the restaurant, the spatula gleaming faintly, the Krabby Patties stacked neatly, the tiny bubbles rising in the sink. Every sound, the sizzling, the ocean hum, the faint tick of the wall clock blended into a quiet symphony. Then, as the scene widened, we see Bikini Bottom bathed in morning gold, jellyfish drifting gently, seaweed swaying like curtains, Sandy climbing out of her dome, yawning and stretching, Squidward unlocking his door, coffee mug in hand, eyes still half closed. Life continued, simple and beautiful. The narrator spoke again, his tone fading into reverence. "The sea keeps its legends, but it does not keep them hidden. Every small act, every laugh, every kindness carries the same light that once forged gold beneath the waves." Cut back to SpongeBob, placing the last Krabby Patty on a plate and setting it in front of a customer with a cheerful "Here you go." The customer smiled. "Thanks. Smells amazing." SpongeBob beamed. "It's made with care." The golden spatula gleamed once more, briefly a heartbeat of warmth, then settled, ordinary again. The music softened, a lullaby played on glassy chimes and cello mimicking the rhythm of the sea. Outside, bubbles rose lazily toward the surface. As one drifted upward, the camera followed it past the rooftops of Bikini Bottom, past coral fields and swaying kelp, up through the glowing blue layers of the ocean. The higher it floated, the brighter the light became, until finally it burst through the surface into the open sunlight above a single golden bubble reflecting the whole sea beneath. Goodbye.